Hi guys and welcome to Relaxing History Time. Tonight we're going to journey deep beneath the Earth's surface, exploring an ancient way of life that most of us rarely think about. Imagine you're standing on a windswept plain, snow swirling in every direction, the air so cold it takes your breath away. You pull your coat tighter, but nothing seems to cut through the sharp sting of the frost. Now imagine that instead of retreating to the warmth of a modern home, you're heading underground into a dwelling carved deep into the earth designed to protect against the kind of cold that could freeze a person solid in minutes. Welcome to the world of ancient underground homes, where survival was not just about shelter, but about mastering the earth itself. These homes weren't just simple places to live. They were feats of engineering ingenuity and resilience. You probably won't survive this journey, at least not without some serious imagination and grit. But that's exactly the kind of survival many ancient peoples had to face in the coldest regions of the world. And survive they did. In this story, we'll discover how the harshest climates forced people to seek refuge beneath the surface of the earth itself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to share where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Let's connect over time and place. Now dim the lights and let's begin our journey. The need for underground homes wasn't born from luxury or convenience. It came from necessity, the kind of necessity that forces people to get creative with their survival strategies. In some of the coldest places on Earth, winters could last for months with temperatures dropping so low that even a sturdy building above ground would struggle to keep its inhabitants warm. We're talking about places where frostbite wasn't just a possibility, it was a certainty if you weren't careful. And yet in these places, people built entire communities below the surface where the temperature remained constant and manageable no matter how brutal the winter winds howled outside. The history of these underground dwellings stretches back thousands of years. The first humans to adapt to the frozen world weren't just looking for a place to rest their heads at night. They were searching for something more fundamental: survival. As early as 10,000 years ago in the colder regions of Europe, the Near East and even parts of North America, people realized that the Earth, with its layers of soil and rock, could act as a natural insulator. Earth is a great heat regulator, constantly staying at a steady temperature beneath the surface. When people took shelter underground, they could avoid the extreme temperature fluctuations that plagued life above the surface. There's a very real science to this. The deeper you go beneath the Earth's surface, the more stable the temperature becomes. Even in the harshest winters, the Earth stays at a relatively mild temperature, thanks to its thermal mass, the ability of a material to store heat. It's the same principle that makes wine cellars so reliable in storing wine at a consistent temperature, or why cave dwellers in hot climates could escape the scorching summer heat. In northern climates, this meant that the air inside an underground home remained comfortably cool in summer and warm in winter. If you've ever been in a cave or cellar, you might have noticed how the temperature stays pretty consistent no matter what's happening outside. The same principle applied to the underground homes we're talking about today. The first real underground dwellings were simple affairs dug into the earth by hand. Early humans living in the colder regions of the world would dig into the ground or into the sides of hills and cliffs. They used whatever tools they had at their disposal, from primitive stone tools to the more sophisticated ones developed over time. These homes were often small and simple, but they had one key advantage over above-ground structures: they were insulated. Even before people fully understood the science behind it, they could feel the difference in temperature when they lived underground. At first, these dwellings were likely small single-room homes, but as time went on, people began to develop more complex systems. In colder climates, such as those found in the northern parts of Europe and Asia, the Earth itself became an essential part of daily life. It wasn't just about having a roof over your head. It was about keeping warm, protecting yourself from the elements, and ensuring that food, water, and warmth were all close at hand. These homes carved into the earth offered not only protection from the cold, but also a sense of permanence and stability that life above the surface couldn't always guarantee. We could say that these underground dwellings were in many ways an early form of climate adaptation, but they also served as protection against more than just the cold. In some areas, living underground also helped safeguard against wild animals, marauding groups, and even natural disasters. These homes dug into the earth provided an oasis of safety in a world where danger could be found on every side. But of course, not every place was suitable for such homes. They needed certain conditions, such as the right kind of soil or earth that could be easily dug but would still hold its shape and provide proper insulation. Not every region on Earth had this, so while some cultures embraced underground living, others had to adapt in different ways. For those who lived in these cold regions, underground living became not just a way of surviving the elements, but also a lifestyle. In some places, entire communities were built beneath the surface, with homes connected by tunnels and pathways that kept the warmth circulating between them. It wasn't just about individual shelters. It was about creating a shared underground environment, one where everyone worked together to maintain warmth, share resources, and keep the cold at bay. The architecture of these homes reflected the way people lived and interacted with each other, fostering a sense of closeness and cooperation that was essential for survival. Historians still argue whether these underground homes were always as carefully constructed as we think of them today, or whether they were originally crude makeshift shelters. Some suggest that early underground homes were little more than temporary digs, places to retreat from a storm or winter chill, before returning to more permanent homes above ground. Others, however, believe that once people discovered the benefits of living underground, they began to refine and perfect these dwellings, turning them into functional long-term homes. The truth, as is often the case with ancient history, is somewhere in between. As we step deeper into this world, we'll discover how these homes evolved over time, becoming more sophisticated and complex. From simple dugouts to multi-room dwellings, the underground homes of ancient peoples were more than just shelters. They were a testament to human ingenuity, resourcefulness, and the unyielding desire to survive. So let's take a step further into this world, imagining what it would have been like to live in one of these underground homes. As we continue, let's move deeper into the fascinating world of these underground homes. Imagine now you're standing at the entrance of one of these ancient dwellings. The air outside is biting, the kind of cold that cuts through your clothes and numbs your fingers, but as soon as you step through the narrow doorway, you're embraced by a surprising warmth. It's not the kind of warmth that you feel from a crackling fire, but rather a quiet, stable heat that seems to radiate from the very walls themselves. The walls made of earthstone or sometimes even ice hold on to warmth like a loving embrace. You're not just inside a home, you've entered a shelter that has been specifically designed to keep the frigid world at bay. This environment wasn't just a coincidence. The process of building these underground homes was driven by the need to conserve heat and protect the inhabitants from the extreme cold outside. The first layer of protection came from the earth itself. Earth, as we now know, has a natural ability to act as an insulator. When people first started digging into the earth for shelter, they unknowingly tapped into a natural resource that would help them survive the harshest winters. The deeper you go into the earth, the more stable the temperature becomes, and the less affected it is by the seasonal shifts that rule life above the surface. Imagine a steady, consistent temperature, one that doesn't change with the time of day or the change in season. This made underground homes incredibly valuable for those living in places where the winters were long and brutal. At first, these underground dwellings were little more than simple dugouts, holes in the ground that provided shelter from the wind and cold. But over time, people learned how to take advantage of the Earth's insulating properties to build more comfortable homes. These weren't just places to hide from the cold. They were designed to create a living space that could sustain life year-round. The people who lived in these homes were not just surviving, they were thriving in an environment that would have left most of us shivering in the cold. The homes of these ancient peoples were often carved into hillsides or built into the sides of cliffs. The entrances were typically narrow, often leading down a set of stairs or a short tunnel before opening up into the main living space. Once inside, the temperature would remain stable even in the dead of winter. The people who lived in these homes would have felt a profound sense of safety and warmth, knowing that they were protected from the harsh cold that raged outside. But it wasn't just about the temperature inside. The construction techniques used to build these homes were just as important as the Earth's natural insulation. In many cases, the walls were reinforced with wooden beams or stone which helped to prevent the Earth from collapsing inward. These materials also provided additional insulation, trapping the heat inside the dwelling. The ceilings of these homes were often low, further trapping the warmth near the floor where people spent most of their time. The living spaces were small, cozy, even with just enough room for the essentials: a place to sleep, a place to eat, and a place to gather with family and neighbours. There was no need for excess. These homes were efficient, designed to meet the basic needs of the inhabitants. One of the most interesting aspects of these underground homes was the way in which they blended into their surroundings. Unlike the large, imposing structures we think of today, these homes were often invisible from the outside. They were built into the landscape using the earth itself as a camouflage. The entrances were often hidden from view, making it difficult for outsiders to find them. This added an element of safety, as these communities could remain hidden from invaders or anyone looking to harm them. In many cases, these homes were part of larger underground villages, connected by a network of tunnels that allowed the residents to move between different homes without stepping outside. This created a sense of community, even in the most extreme conditions. But of course, these homes weren't perfect. Living underground came with its own set of challenges. One of the most obvious difficulties was the lack of natural light. Without windows or open spaces, these homes were dark, and the only source of light came from candles, fire, or oil lamps. This created a unique atmosphere inside the homes, dimly lit with flickering shadows playing along the walls. It would have been a far cry from the bright open spaces we're used to today, but for those who lived there, this darkness was simply a part of their daily lives. The air inside these underground homes could also become stale. Without proper ventilation, the air would quickly become thick and muddy. In some cases, people would dig small air shafts or vents into the walls to allow fresh air to flow in. But this wasn't always possible. It was a delicate balance between maintaining warmth and ensuring the air didn't become too suffocating. Despite these challenges, the residents of these homes learned to adapt, developing ways to manage the environment in ways that suited their needs. In addition to the basic design of the homes, the people who lived in these underground communities also developed unique methods for heating and cooking. Fire played a central role in these homes, but unlike the fires we build in modern homes, the fires inside these underground dwellings had to be carefully controlled. A poorly contained fire could quickly turn dangerous in the confined space of an underground home, so special care was taken to build chimneys or flues that would direct smoke safely outside. The hearths were often built into the centre of the home, surrounded by stones or bricks to help hold the heat. People would gather around the fire for warmth and cooking, using it as a focal point for family life. Food storage was another critical aspect of life in these homes. In the cold, fresh food was difficult to come by, and it needed to be stored in a way that kept it from spoiling. Meat, for example, would be salted, smoked, or dried to preserve it, and root vegetables could be stored in cool, dark places to keep them fresh. In some cultures, people would store food in large underground cellars, which were ideal for keeping food at a stable temperature. These cellars would be dug deep into the earth, creating an ideal environment for preserving food long after the harvest had ended. Historians still argue whether the underground homes of the ancient world were primarily driven by necessity, or whether they represented something more symbolic. Some believe these homes were simply the most practical solution to an extreme problem, the need to survive in cold, harsh environments. Others suggest that these dwellings had a deeper cultural significance, offering a sense of connection to the earth itself. Whether practical or symbolic, these homes remain an enduring testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of those who lived in them. Now that you've gotten a taste of life inside one of these underground homes, let's take a moment to step back and look at the bigger picture. How did these structures evolve over time? Imagine a community that's lived underground for generations, gradually refining the design of their homes to make them even more efficient, warmer, and more livable. The evolution of these underground dwellings was not just about survival anymore. It became a process of perfecting a way of life that blended seamlessly with the earth. At first, as we've discussed, these homes were simple one-room structures. People would dig into the earth, carve out a small space, and call it home. It was practical and necessary, but it wasn't particularly comfortable. As time went on, however, these homes began to evolve. People learned how to shape and reinforce the earth, turning their dugouts into more sophisticated multi-room homes. The walls were often lined with stone or wood to provide additional strength, and the ceilings, originally low and simple, became more vaulted and spacious. The result was a home that was not only warm and safe, but also a place that people could settle into for the long term. But this wasn't just a simple process of digging deeper into the earth. These homes were carefully designed to take advantage of the natural resources around them. The soil, the stone, the very geography of the land itself, everything was considered when building a home. In some cases, entire villages were built underground, with homes connected by tunnels and passageways that allowed people to move between different spaces without stepping outside. This was an ingenious way to protect themselves from the cold and from any threats that might have been lurking above ground. The concept of building in the earth wasn't confined to just one area or culture. Across the globe, different communities found their own ways to adapt the idea of underground living to their unique environments. For example, in the Arctic, the Inuit people developed the igloo, a temporary shelter made from blocks of compacted snow. While the igloo may seem like a far cry from the more permanent underground homes we're discussing here, it shares the same basic principle, using the Earth's natural materials to create a warm, insulated shelter. The igloo, however, wasn't just about digging it into the ground. The Inuit used the snow itself as a building material, which is a remarkable adaptation, considering snow is often seen as a barrier to survival. By packing the snow tightly, the Inuit were able to create blocks that could be stacked and shaped into domes. The resulting structure was incredibly efficient, keeping the cold air outside and the warmth inside. Like the underground homes we've been discussing, igloos were designed to withstand extreme temperatures, keeping their inhabitants safe from the brutal cold of the Arctic. In more temperate regions, the process of creating underground dwellings was less about survival against freezing cold and more about regulating temperature. People living in areas where summers could be unbearably hot and winters frigid used the same principles of earth insulation to create homes that kept the temperature consistent year-round. These homes were often built into hillsides or cliffs, where the earth itself provided a natural shield from the sun's heat during the summer and the winter winds during the colder months. In these regions, underground homes weren't just a matter of necessity, they were a matter of comfort, offering a refuge from both extreme heat and extreme cold. Historians still argue whether the design of underground homes in these different cultures was influenced by a shared set of principles, or whether they were simply the result of a similar response to similar environmental pressures. It's possible that different cultures arrived at the same basic solution independently, given the universal need for shelter in extreme climates. But it's also possible that there was some cross-cultural exchange that influenced the development of underground architecture. Regardless of the specifics, what's clear is that the underground home became a powerful symbol of human ingenuity and adaptability in the face of nature's challenges. The materials used in these homes were just as varied as the cultures that built them. In the Arctic, for example, ice and snow were the primary building materials. In more temperate regions, people used the earth itself along with wood, stone, and clay to create structures that could withstand the elements. Over time, people learned how to work with these materials to create homes that were not only functional but beautiful. The walls of underground homes were often adorned with carvings, paintings, or decorations that reflected the cultural values of the people who lived there. In some cases, entire murals were painted onto the walls of underground chambers, turning what could have been cold utilitarian spaces into something more expressive and meaningful. Life in these underground homes wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a space that reflected the identity and values of the people who lived there. The homes were built to be not only functional but also places of comfort and security. For many, the underground dwelling became a symbol of resilience, a testament to their ability to adapt and thrive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. And as we'll see, this resilience was not just physical but cultural. The communities that lived in these homes formed tight-knit bonds, relying on one another for survival and support. The underground home became a place of shared experience where people came together to survive, to create and to build something that would last for generations. While these homes were undoubtedly practical, they also represented something deeper. In some cultures, living underground was seen as a way of reconnecting with the earth itself. The earth was not just a source of shelter, it was a living, breathing entity, and the homes built within it were seen as a way of harmonizing with the natural world. For many, the underground home was a sacred space, a place where the boundary between the human world and the natural world was blurred. Living in harmony with the earth was not just a matter of survival, it was a spiritual practice, one that reflected the deep connection people had with the land around them. So as we continue our journey through the underground homes of ancient peoples, we'll begin to see how these spaces were not just places of shelter, but places of meaning. The people who lived in these homes didn't just carve out spaces in the earth, they carved out a way of life that was deeply connected to the natural world and to one another. You keep moving north now, step by careful step, until the cold stops feeling like a seasonal inconvenience and starts feeling like a permanent condition. The kind of cold that settles into the land itself. In these regions, winter is not a visitor, it is a ruler. And this is where underground living stops being clever and starts being essential. You imagine yourself among Arctic communities thousands of years ago where trees are scarce, stone is stubborn, and the ground itself is locked in permafrost for most of the year. Above ground, building materials are limited, and exposed structures are punished relentlessly by wind and drifting snow, so people do what humans have always done best. They adapt. They look down instead of out. One well-established historical reality is that Arctic and subarctic societies developed semi-underground winter houses long before contact with modern building traditions. Archaeological evidence from Alaska, northern Canada and Greenland shows homes dug partially into the ground, often with sod walls and roofs supported by driftwood or whalebone. These were not crude shelters thrown together in desperation. They were carefully planned seasonal homes designed specifically for winter survival. You step inside one of these houses in your mind. The entrance is low, forcing you to crouch, which feels inconvenient until you realize the purpose. Cold air sinks, warm air rises. By keeping the entrance tunnel lower than the living space, icy air stays trapped near the floor, while warmer air pools where people sit and sleep. It is quiet in here. The wind is reduced to a distant hum. Your breath slows without you even noticing. There is something deeply intentional about this layout. Sleeping platforms line the walls. Storage areas are carved into corners. Everything has a place because disorder wastes energy, and energy in this climate is life itself. A curious detail that often surprises people is that these homes were sometimes warmed not by roaring fires, but by small oil lamps fueled with seal or whale fat. The flame was modest, almost unimpressive by modern standards, yet combined with body heat and insulation, it was enough. Too much fire would have been dangerous, filling the space with smoke or melting structural elements. Warmth here was about balance, not abundance. Scholars still debate whether these underground Arctic homes evolved independently across regions or spread through cultural exchange along migration routes. Similar design principles appear thousands of miles apart, which raises fascinating questions. Did people share ideas across frozen coastlines? Or did the environment itself quietly teach the same lessons again and again? As you settle into this imagined space, you notice the smell. A mix of earth oil and something faintly organic. Not unpleasant, just different. Outside, the landscape is harsh and blindingly bright with snow glare. Inside, the light is soft, reflected off pale walls, steady and calm. time moves differently down here. These homes were not just practical structures, they were social spaces. During the long polar nights, families gathered together for warmth, storytelling, tool-making and teaching. Children learned by watching adults shape tools or prepare food. Knowledge was passed hand to hand, voice to voice in rooms where leaving was often impossible for days at a time. There is a lesser known but fascinating tidbit about these Arctic underground homes. Some were deliberately designed to be dismantled. In certain coastal communities, winter houses were abandoned in spring as groups moved to seasonal camps. Materials like sod blocks and bones could be reused or simply returned to the landscape. The home was not a permanent scar on the land, but a temporary partnership with it. This seasonal rhythm shaped how people understood ownership and permanence. A house was not something you possessed forever. It was something you used, respected, and then let go of. That idea feels surprisingly modern, especially in a world now grappling with sustainability. You can almost hear the sounds of life continuing. Soft conversation, the scrape of a tool against bone, a child shifting under layers of fur. Outside, the wind screams across ice and snow, but inside there is a cocoon-like calm. The contrast is striking. It reminds you how powerful design can be when it listens closely to the environment instead of fighting it. Researchers continue to discuss whether living underground in such conditions also had psychological benefits beyond warmth. Some argue that the enclosed stable environment reduced stress during months of darkness and isolation. Others suggest it may have intensified cabin fever, making social harmony essential for survival. Either way, it is clear that these homes shape not only bodies but minds. As you linger here, you realize something else. These underground houses were not signs of hardship alone. They were evidence of confidence. Confidence that people understood their land well enough to live within it. Confidence that community and cooperation could overcome even the most unforgiving climate. And as the northern wind continues to roar above you, feel that steady earthen warmth holding firm below. In the next stretch of our journey, you will start to notice how architecture itself became a quiet science, refined generation by generation, shaping spaces that worked with cold instead of against it. Now that we've seen how people in the Arctic adapted to extreme cold, let's shift focus and dive into the fascinating world of the architecture of these underground homes. The very idea of designing a shelter beneath the surface might sound strange to modern ears where building upwards seems to be the norm. But in ancient times, it wasn't just about creating space for shelter. It was about working with the earth to form a home that could withstand the elements, offer comfort, and last for generations. When you step inside one of these subterranean homes, the first thing that hits you is the thick walls. They're far from flimsy. In fact, they're solid, built to trap warmth and provide insulation. Ancient builders understood something that would take modern architects centuries to fully grasp. The secret to warmth was mass. And the more mass a structure had, the more it could regulate its temperature. This principle is known as thermal mass, and it was used to incredible effect in these underground homes. The thick, compacted earth, stone, or even ice walls of these homes kept the interior insulated from the world outside. The moment you enter, the change is striking. Even if the temperature outside drops to unbearable lows, the temperature inside will remain steady. A few layers of earth or rock were all it took to create a buffer between the biting cold and the cozy warmth of the home. While modern homes might rely on heating systems to maintain a consistent temperature, these underground dwellings used the earth itself to provide a natural constant warmth. It wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was about thriving in it. A quirky little tidbit to note here is that in many cases, people actually chose to build their homes partially submerged. They didn't dig entirely down, but instead excavated into hillsides or even existing structures like caves. This clever technique took advantage of the natural contours of the land, cutting down on the amount of digging required and using the landscape to enhance the insulation of the structure. The entrances were typically small tunnels or shuts carefully designed to limit the amount of cold air that could enter. These homes were like little insulated pockets in the vast expanse of ice and snow. Historians still debate whether this underground living arrangement was purely driven by environmental necessity, or whether it also had a symbolic or cultural importance. For some, living below the surface may have provided a psychological benefit, offering a sense of safety and stability, a sanctuary from the wild, unpredictable world above. There was something deeply comforting about being surrounded by the earth itself, cocooned from the elements. In a way, these homes offered not just physical warmth, but also a mental sense of protection, a refuge from the dangers of the world. One of the key features that made these homes so efficient at retaining heat was the architecture of the roofs. Rather than building traditional peaked roofs, many of these homes featured domed or even flat roofs made from materials like sod or thatch. The idea was that these roofs could be packed with earth, which would add an extra layer of insulation. When you think about it, it's a bit like living in a natural igloo, but with walls that went deep into the earth instead of being made of ice. The materials used for the roof were often flexible enough to allow for minor shifts in the earth beneath so they wouldn't crack or collapse under pressure. The design of the living space inside these homes was just as clever. Many homes were divided into multiple rooms, each designed for a different function, such as cooking, sleeping, and storage. The division of space inside the home wasn't just practical, it also helped to retain heat. The living area where people spent most of their time was always the warmest, while other rooms such as food storage or tool areas were cooler, but still insulated from the harsh temperatures outside. In some places, underground homes were even built with separate chambers for sleeping, so families could use body heat to warm the space overnight. Food storage, too, was a key consideration in these homes. The temperature control that kept people warm also helped preserve food. Cold temperatures helped prevent spoilage, while the insulating walls slowed the growth of bacteria. Roots, vegetables, and preserved meat could be stored in small underground cellars, keeping them safe from both the elements and predators. In some cases, food storage areas were separated from the main living space so the heat of the home wouldn't cause food to spoil. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of these homes is how they represented an intimate relationship between people and the earth. These homes were not just shelters, but embodiments of survival and respect for nature's power. The way the houses were built, the materials used, and the way the interiors were arranged reflected a profound understanding of the environment and how best to work with it. It wasn't just about building a structure to survive. It was about building a space that functioned harmoniously with the landscape. The walls were often decorated with intricate carvings or paintings, each design telling the story of the people who lived there. These artistic flourishes transformed what could have been a simple utilitarian shelter into a place of personal expression and identity. Living underground wasn't just about surviving the elements, it was about creating a space where life could flourish, where community could grow, and where traditions could be passed down through generations. Scholars continue to explore the relationship between these underground structures and the cultures that built them. Was this form of architecture an inherent part of their cultural identity, or was it simply the result of practicality? Some argue that the use of underground homes was more than just a response to cold weather. It was a way of forging a deeper connection to the land, a symbolic return to the earth itself. Others suggest that the homes were purely functional, an adaptation to the cold that had little to do with spiritual beliefs or cultural practices. Either way, the fact remains that these homes were incredibly efficient, providing safety and warmth for generations. As we move forward in this journey, we'll continue to explore how these homes influenced the communities that lived in them, and how even today, the lessons learned from these ancient builders are shaping the way we think about sustainable architecture. These homes weren't just about keeping warm, they were about understanding the land and using its resources wisely, and in that respect they were ahead of their time. Let's take a closer look at what life inside these underground homes might have been like. Picture yourself walking down the narrow tunnel, your breath fogging in the cold as you make your way deeper into the heart of the home. The air is cool but not biting. You step into the main living area, and the atmosphere immediately changes. It's warm, surprisingly so. The low ceiling gives a sense of intimacy, and the walls covered in thick earth or stone seem to hold the heat within. The light is soft flickering from a few oil lamps, or perhaps a fire crackling in the centre of the room. It's not a harsh artificial light, but a gentle, warm glow that feels almost like the room itself is breathing with you. Now close your eyes and imagine the sounds of this underground home. It's not completely silent, but it's quiet in a way that brings comfort. The crackling of the fire, the low murmur of voices, and the occasional sound of footsteps on the earth floor are the sounds of everyday life. There is a rhythmic calm to this world, slow, deliberate, but full of purpose. Here you're safe from the winds outside, and there's a deep sense of peace that comes with that knowledge. One of the most striking aspects of life in these underground homes was the sense of community they fostered. Unlike the solitary isolation we often associate with underground spaces today, these homes were often designed to be shared by extended families or even entire communities. You might have shared the warmth of the hearth with your parents, siblings, grandparents, and even cousins. There was little separation between work and home life, and this constant interaction created strong familial and social bonds. But it wasn't just about survival, it was about living in harmony with one another. You see, life in these underground homes demanded cooperation. Since space was limited, the community was forced to work together, share resources, and look out for one another. There was no room for selfishness or isolation. Every member of the community had a role to play, whether it was gathering food, tending to the fire, or caring for the children. In a way, this environment helped to strengthen the social fabric of these communities, creating tight-knit groups that relied on each other for warmth, safety, and sustenance. A quirky tidbit is that these underground homes were often designed to be efficient, not just in terms of temperature regulation, but in terms of space usage as well. For instance, people would often sleep in shifts with members of the family, curling up in layers of furs on platforms or in alcoves carved into the walls. These sleeping arrangements were designed to maximize warmth and efficiency. In fact, the proximity of bodies along with the insulating properties of animal skins and the structure of the home itself meant that heat was conserved more effectively than in above-ground homes. This was a space where warmth wasn't just generated from a fire, it was carefully shared and redistributed through every crevice of the home. Food was also central to life in these underground homes. Due to the extreme cold outside, fresh food was scarce, but that didn't mean there was a lack of nutrition. The inhabitants relied heavily on preserved food meats that were dried, smoked, or salted, along with root vegetables and grains that could be stored for long periods. These items were often stored in cool underground cellars that benefited from the temperature regulation of the earth, keeping food fresh for months or even years. You might find dried fish hanging from the rafters or salted meats carefully arranged in storage bins. Every piece of food was precious and treated with respect, as survival often depended on making the most of every resource. Historians still argue whether the isolation of living underground caused feelings of claustrophobia or anxiety, but there are indications that many who lived in these homes embraced the environment. There was comfort in the enclosure, a sense of security that came from being shielded by the earth itself. People who lived in these homes didn't just use the earth for protection from the cold, they saw it as a source of sustenance and support, a provider that kept them safe and warm during the long winter months. The way these homes were constructed also played a significant role in shaping the social dynamics of these communities. Because of the unique layout of the spaces, people in underground homes had little privacy, which may have encouraged more communal living and interaction. Imagine living in such close quarters with your extended family and neighbours. You wouldn't have had much time to yourself, but this could have fostered a sense of solidarity and shared responsibility. Privacy was a luxury that wasn't often afforded in these homes. Instead, the focus was on cooperation and mutual support. Everyone had to pull their weight to keep the home functioning, and this reliance on one another helped to strengthen the bonds of community. Inside these underground homes, life was about rhythm. The days followed a pattern: gathering food, caring for the children, maintaining the warmth of the hearth, and preparing for the cold outside. In the winter, when the days were short and the nights stretched on for what felt like forever, the warmth of the home became a sanctuary. But it wasn't just about keeping the cold at bay, it was about creating a space where people could thrive even in the harshest conditions. The designs of these homes, along with the routines of daily life, allowed people to build strong communities that lasted for generations, passing down knowledge, stories, and traditions. These homes weren't just places to sleep, they were central to the way people lived, worked, and interacted. They provided shelter from the extreme conditions, yes, but they also served as the heart of the community. They were spaces where people gathered, connected, and formed relationships. And just as the earth sheltered them from the elements, it also created a place where their cultures could grow, thrive, and be passed on. There's an undeniable sense of intimacy in these underground homes, a feeling of being deeply connected to the earth and to one another. In many ways, these homes were the epitome of resilience, response to the cold that was at once practical and profound. As we continue our journey, we'll see how this spirit of adaptation and community continued to shape the lives of those who lived in these incredible spaces. It wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was about building a life together, rooted deep in the earth where warmth and security could be found even in the harshest of conditions. Let's take a step back now and consider the grander scope of these underground homes, especially when we look at how they were built and how they shape the way people lived. When you think of them as architecture, you might picture towering stone structures or grand palaces, but the underground houses we're talking about were far more subtle, blending into the earth itself. The people who built these homes weren't just constructing shelter, they were shaping their relationship with the world around them. In a way, they were working with nature instead of fighting it. Building these homes wasn't just about digging a hole and moving in. It was an intricate process that required great knowledge of both the land and the climate. People had to know where to dig and what materials to use. In regions like the Arctic, where the earth is frozen for most of the year, digging into the ground wasn't an easy task. The tools were often rudimentary and the work could take months. The builders had to be patient, careful, and above all, resilient. Every stroke of a shovel or pick had to be precise, because the integrity of the structure depended on the quality of the earth surrounding it. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these homes were constructed with simple yet highly effective materials as earthstone and sometimes ice. In some areas, the earth itself was dug out and reinforced with timber or stone. In other areas, ice was the material of choice, particularly in places like the Arctic, where snow was abundant and cold temperatures made it possible to build with frozen blocks. These homes were designed to be as sturdy as possible, able to withstand not just the cold but the occasional movement of the earth itself. But the real brilliance of these designs came in how they were shaped by the environment. The placement of the home was often just as important as the materials used to build it. People understood that the most effective underground homes were those that made the best use of the land's natural features. A hill or cliffside offered the perfect place to build, as it provided both insulation and protection from the wind. Tunnels, low entrances, and domed roofs were common features, all working together to trap warmth and prevent the cold from seeping in. Interestingly, scholars still debate whether the process of building underground homes was a matter of necessity or choice. Some argue that people built underground simply because it was the best way to survive the extreme cold. Others suggest that underground living was part of a larger cultural pattern, a reflection of a deeper connection to the earth itself. The question remained, was it solely about survival, or was it also about a profound respect for the environment? As you picture these homes in your mind, you begin to realize that their architecture wasn't just about form, it was about function. Every design decision had a purpose now. For instance, the low ceilings inside these homes helped trap heat, while the layout of rooms allowed for efficient use of space and warmth. In many cases, these homes featured small enclosed spaces that acted as sleeping quarters or storage areas. These spaces were designed not just for comfort, but for efficiency, using every inch of available space to maintain warmth and ensure the survival of the inhabitants. A quirky tidbit about these underground homes is how they were sometimes built with dual purposes. In regions where winters were extremely harsh, people would often convert these homes into multifunctional spaces. For example, a single room could serve as both a sleeping area and a space for food preparation. Storage areas were often cleverly hidden in walls or under the floor, ensuring that valuable resources were kept safe and warm. The adaptability of these homes speaks to the resourcefulness of their inhabitants, who knew how to make the most of what little they had. As we look deeper into how these homes functioned, we realize that the key to their success was not just the materials used, but also the way the inhabitants interacted with their environment. Life inside these homes required a certain mindset, a mindset that embraced simplicity, cooperation, and a deep respect for the land. People didn't just use the earth to build their homes, they worked with it, allowing it to dictate the structure and layout. There was an understanding that the land was both a provider and a protector, and the architecture reflected this relationship. Historians still argue whether the practice of living underground was a widespread phenomenon or a more localized tradition, with evidence pointing to both independent development and cultural exchanges across regions. In some areas, the idea of building into the earth was so deeply ingrained that it became a cultural norm, passed down through generations. In others, it may have been the result of necessity or even inspired by the survival techniques of neighboring cultures. What's clear is that these underground homes were not the product of chance. They were a deliberate, thoughtful response to some of the harshest climates on Earth. Over time, these homes evolved. What began as simple single-room dwellings eventually gave way to more complex multi-room structures. People began to experiment with new materials and construction techniques, always refining their designs to make them more efficient and comfortable. In some cases, people even began to incorporate decorative elements, carving intricate designs into the walls or using bright colours to paint the interiors. These small touches of creativity and artistry brought life to otherwise utilitarian structures. It's fascinating to think about how these ancient underground homes continue to inspire modern architecture. In today's world, we're seeing a resurgence of interest in sustainable building practices, and some architects are looking to the past for inspiration. The principles behind underground living, using natural materials, designing for efficiency, and embracing the environment are being integrated into modern eco-friendly homes. What once seemed like an ancient survival strategy is now being reimagined as a way to reduce our environmental impact and create homes that work with rather than against nature. As you reflect on all of this, you can't help but marvel at the ingenuity and resilience of the people who built these underground homes. Their ability to adapt to some of the harshest environments on Earth to work with the land instead of fighting against it is a testament to the power of human creativity and resourcefulness. And as we continue our journey through the history of underground living, we'll see how these ancient homes laid the groundwork for the sustainable Earth-conscious designs of today. Now let's take a deeper look at the role of thermal mass in these underground homes. Imagine you're standing inside one of these spaces looking at the thick earthen walls. You've already felt the warmth that radiates through the air, and you've experienced the stillness that comes with it. You know that this warmth isn't just from a fire or oil lamp, it's something more fundamental, a natural steady heat that's being drawn from the earth itself. The earth acts as a massive heat sink, absorbing and storing heat during the day, and then releasing it at night, keeping the space comfortable and stable. This natural process is known as thermal mass, and it's one of the key features that made these underground homes so effective at maintaining warmth. Thermal mass is a property of materials that allows them to absorb and store heat. In the case of underground homes, the earth's stone and other dense materials used in construction were excellent at storing heat. During the day, the earth would absorb heat from the sun or the fire inside the home. At night, when temperatures outside dropped, the heat stored in the walls and floors would slowly release, keeping the home warm long after the fire had burned out. Historians still debate whether this reliance on thermal mass was understood consciously by ancient builders, or whether it was simply a byproduct of the materials available to them. Some argue that the use of thermal mass was an intuitive choice based on generations of trial and error. Others suggest that these early builders had a deeper understanding of the principles of heat transfer and insulation. Whatever the case may be, it's clear that these homes were carefully designed to take advantage of this natural phenomenon, and they did so with remarkable efficiency. This is where things get interesting. Imagine the sensation of being in a room that stays warm all day without needing constant attention. There's no need to stoke the fire every few hours. The warmth seems to come from the very walls themselves, creating an atmosphere of comfort that doesn't rely on the usual bursts of heat from a fire or furnace. It's almost as if the earth itself is participating in the act of keeping you warm. And in a sense it is. The walls of these homes were not passive structures, they were active participants in the creation of a warm, sustainable environment. A quirky tidbit here is that some of these homes were built with a feature known as a bench top, a kind of raised insulated platform where people could sit and sleep. These bench tops were strategically placed near the walls where the thermal mass would be most effective. In some cultures, these platforms were also designed to allow heat to circulate beneath them, so people could stay warm while resting or sleeping. The design was a clever way to take advantage of the Earth's heat, without overloading the space with unnecessary heat sources. Another interesting aspect of these homes is that they didn't just rely on thermal mass to keep warm. In many cases, builders incorporated a clever use of ventilation to help maintain air quality while also controlling the temperature. Fresh air was drawn in through small shafts or vents, which allowed for proper airflow without letting the cold inside. The air would pass over the earth, becoming naturally warmed before entering the living space. This system allowed for a constant supply of fresh air without disrupting the temperature inside the home. It was a beautiful balance between insulation and ventilation, creating an environment that was both comfortable and livable. As you think about these clever systems, you realize that these ancient builders were not just focused on survival in a practical sense. They were masters of creating environments that balanced efficiency, comfort, and sustainability. The homes they built were the product of a deep understanding of their surroundings and a respect for the natural forces at play. By working with the earth, they created spaces that were in tune with their environment, using the very materials around them to their advantage. One fascinating debate among scholars is whether these underground homes were simply a product of their environment or whether they were also influenced by deeper cultural and spiritual beliefs. Some believe that these homes were seen as more than just shelters. They were sacred spaces representing a connection to the earth and the ancestors who had lived there before. For many cultures, the act of building underground was a symbolic gesture, reflecting a desire to stay close to the earth and its forces. In some cultures, the home was seen as a place of rebirth, a place where life began and where the cycle of life and death was understood to take place in the very soil. Others argue that the decision to live underground was purely practical, driven by the need to survive in harsh environments. But no matter the motivation, there's no denying that these homes were effective at creating warmth and shelter, and their use of thermal mass played a central role in this success. As we continue our journey, we'll see how this use of the Earth's natural properties wasn't just limited to the Arctic and cold regions, it spread to other areas as well, influencing the way people designed homes and lived in harmony with their environment. It's clear that the principles of thermal mass and earth sheltering were more than just an ancient survival technique. They were part of a larger understanding of the world around them, a way of living that respected the Earth's resources and worked with them to create homes that were both functional and sustainable. Now imagine the shift in the air as you move through these underground homes, sensing the ever-present balance of heat and cold. In the coldest places on Earth, the very idea of warmth becomes something sacred. The home becomes more than just a shelter. It becomes a fortress against the elements and a testament to the ingenuity of those who built it. The people who lived in these underground houses were not only surviving, they were thriving, using the earth as both a shield and a partner in their survival. This leads us to a deeper exploration of the daily life and routines of those who lived in these homes. Step inside and look around. You notice the simplicity of the furnishings. The space isn't cluttered with unnecessary items. There is no room for excess in this environment. Instead, everything has a purpose. The low ceilings and compact layout reflect a way of life that's all about efficiency. There's no space for decoration that doesn't serve a functional purpose. The furnishings are often made from local materials, wood, animal skins, and stone. Sleeping platforms are crafted from logs or packed earth, raised just enough to catch the heat radiating from the walls. The walls themselves are often lined with shelves storing tools, food, and other essentials. Even the fire which burns at the heart of the home is carefully managed to ensure warmth without creating smoke or excess heat. Every part of the space is designed with one goal in mind: survival. A quirky detail is that some of these homes even had designated areas for food preparation and storage that were far more sophisticated than one might think. For example, in certain regions, the kitchen areas were built with sunken floors to capture the warmth that would rise from the earth. This helped keep the temperature at a manageable level, making it easier to cook and preserve food even in the harshest winters. The food would be stored in small insulated rooms, often below the main living space, where the temperature remained cooler but not freezing. These insulated food storage areas were often dug directly into the earth, further highlighting how people used the land itself to ensure their survival. While the structure of these homes was simple, the techniques used to keep them warm were far from basic. People in these underground dwellings knew how to use the Earth's natural insulating properties, and this understanding was passed down through generations. The architecture wasn't just about digging holes in the ground, it was about carefully shaping the Earth to create a balanced and sustainable living environment. It's amazing how something as simple as the Earth could provide such a strong foundation for life in the most inhospitable conditions. Historians still argue whether these underground homes were primarily designed with the individual in mind or whether they were a community-based solution. Some believe these homes were more communal in nature, where multiple families lived together in close quarters to share resources and warmth. This setup might have encouraged strong community ties where everyone worked together to ensure survival. Others suggest that the underground homes were intended more as personal refuges, with families living in isolated pockets where they could maintain a sense of privacy and independence. Regardless of their structure, what's undeniable is the sense of cooperation that came with living in such close quarters. Whether you were part of a larger community or living with your immediate family, life in an underground home meant working together to make sure everyone stayed warm, safe, and well fed. Now think of the fire at the center of the home. It burns brightly, crackling softly, the only source of light in this otherwise dim room. The fire is both a practical necessity and a symbol of life in the home. It's where food is cooked, where warmth is generated, and where people gather. But maintaining a fire in an underground home was no simple task. The placement of the hearth was critical to its success. It had to be situated in such a way that it wouldn't flood the home with smoke or create dangerous heat. In many cases, the fire was built into the center of the room, surrounded by stones or bricks, to help radiate heat evenly throughout the space. The smoke would be directed through vents or chimneys, ensuring that the air inside stayed clean. Scholars still debate whether the fire in these homes was strictly for warmth, or if it also played a more symbolic role in these cultures. Some suggest that the fire represented a connection between the inhabitants and the earth itself. In many cultures, fire held spiritual significance, symbolizing life energy and renewal. The act of tending to the fire might have been seen as a ritual, a way of maintaining a connection to the natural world. Whether or not this was the case, what's clear is that fire was central to the daily life in these underground homes. It provided warmth, food, and light, and its presence brought people together. As you sit by the hearth in this imagined home, you realize that warmth was more than just a physical need. It was a social need as well. The hearth was the heart of the home, the place where people gathered not only for warmth, but for socializing and bonding. The family or community would gather around the fire to share stories, pass down knowledge, and strengthen the ties that bound them together. These gatherings were a chance to connect, to build relationships, and to find comfort in the midst of the harsh environment outside. The fire was more than just a heat source, it was a source of life, comfort, and connection. This connection to the earth and to one another is a recurring theme in the history of underground living. These homes weren't just about survival in a physical sense. They were about building a life that respected the land and fostered community. In a way, living underground created a unique sense of unity. You couldn't survive on your own in such harsh conditions. You had to rely on others, and in turn others relied on you. The cooperation required to thrive in these environments created tight-knit communities that were built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. And this sense of community was reflected in the homes they built. As we move forward, we'll explore how this community-driven approach to underground living influenced the way people interacted with the land, with each other, and with the natural forces that shaped their world. These homes weren't just physical shelters. They were cultural symbols representing a way of life that honoured the earth and the people who lived on it. The more we learn about these homes, the clearer it becomes that they were not just a way to escape the cold, they were a profound expression of human resilience and ingenuity. Let's now take a look at how the design and construction of these underground homes continued to evolve over time. Imagine a group of people who've been living in these earth-sheltered homes for generations. They've lived through countless winters, learned from mistakes, and slowly perfected their methods. Each family or community that built these homes would have passed down knowledge about how to adapt to the environment, how to work with the earth, and how to make life in these spaces more comfortable. The transition from simple dugouts to more sophisticated multi-room homes didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual evolution driven by necessity, but also by ingenuity. At first, these homes were likely crude sink-room structures with a simple opening for a doorway and perhaps a small hearth for warmth. Over time, people began to experiment with more advanced building techniques. The walls of the homes became thicker, and in some places people started incorporating stone or wood to reinforce the structure. The roofs, once low and utilitarian, were redesigned to maximize space and improve insulation. People learned to make the most of their environment using the materials that were readily available to them. One key aspect of this architectural evolution was the use of tunnels. These homes, often built into hillsides or cliffs, began to feature a network of tunnels that connected different living spaces. These passages were more than just functional, they were part of a larger social system. Tunnels provided privacy and allowed people to move between homes without stepping outside. They also created a sense of community, as entire villages were sometimes built underground. The more tunnels people constructed, the more insulated and connected their communities became. A quirky tidbit here is that these tunnels were often designed with more than just practicality in mind. In some cases, the tunnels were intentionally curved or shaped in a way that would funnel heat from the central hearth into different parts of the home. This allowed the warmth from the fire to circulate more efficiently, ensuring that the entire house stayed warm. In addition, some tunnels had specific roles like acting as storage spaces or even serving as areas for social gatherings. These tunnels were part of a carefully planned multifunctional layout that maximized the use of limited space. Historians still argue whether the development of these multi-room, tunnel-connected homes was influenced by neighbouring cultures or whether it was an entirely independent development. Evidence suggests that trade and cultural exchange likely played a role, with architectural ideas spreading along trade routes or through migration. However, some scholars believe that these homes evolved entirely within isolated communities influenced by the environmental pressures of the region rather than outside contact. Either way, it's clear that these communities were not just surviving, they were thriving, creating intricate, interconnected living spaces that allowed them to endure even the harshest winters. As you picture this evolving landscape of underground homes, you realize that the shift from simple to more complex dwellings wasn't just about making life more comfortable. It was about building a sustainable future. These homes were designed to be long-lasting, able to withstand the test of time. They weren't just shelters for a single winter. They were homes meant to endure generations. Each design choice, whether it was the shape of the walls, the placement of the hearth, or the construction of the tunnels, was made with durability in mind. The goal was to create homes that could protect people from the extreme cold, provide for their daily needs, and be passed down to future generations. Scholars still debate whether these underground homes were purely a response to the environment or whether they also reflected deeper cultural values. Some argue that the way these homes were built and arranged reflects a profound connection to the earth. The process of digging into the earth, building walls from natural materials and living in harmony with the land can be seen as a symbolic gesture. In many cultures, the earth was viewed as a provider, a mother figure who gave sustenance and shelter. These homes were not just functional structures, they were a way of paying respect to the land, of acknowledging its power and its importance in sustaining life. This respect for the earth also extended to the materials used in these homes. As we've seen, the walls were made from earth, stone, or ice materials that were abundant in the environment and could be easily worked into shelter. These materials didn't just provide insulation, they were also symbolic. Earth, stone, and ice are elements that connect people to the natural world, reminding them of their dependence on the land. Building with these materials wasn't just practical, it was a way of acknowledging the earth as an essential part of their survival. The structures themselves were an extension of the land they inhabited, shaped by the environment and shaped by the people who lived there. Another fascinating aspect of these homes is how the design of the roof evolved. Early roofs were simple and flat, often made from sod or thatch, but over time these roofs became more complex. People began experimenting with domed or vaulted roofs, which were not only stronger but also more efficient at holding heat. The domed shape allowed for more space inside and provided better insulation, keeping the warmth trapped inside even as the cold winds howled outside. The roofs were often covered with layers of earth, which added another layer of insulation, ensuring that the homes stayed warm throughout the winter. This was a perfect example of how the design of these homes was shaped by the environment. The colder the climate, the more the people worked with the land to create efficient insulated spaces. As we continue to explore the world of underground homes, we can see how these structures represented the pinnacle of human adaptability. They were not just built to survive the harshest winters, they were designed to thrive in them. These homes were an embodiment of resilience, of a community working together to build a sustainable future in the face of adversity. And while these homes may seem like relics of the past, their principles of sustainable earth-based design are more relevant today than ever before. The lessons we can learn from these ancient structures can inform our modern efforts to create homes that are both efficient and environmentally friendly. As we continue to explore the evolution of these underground homes, it's impossible to ignore the cultural and social dynamics that these structures fostered. While much of the focus has been on the practical benefits of living beneath the surface, the social structure within these communities played an equally significant role. These homes were not just isolated shelters, but integral parts of a larger societal framework. Living underground in such close quarters naturally encouraged strong bonds within families and communities. The architecture itself played a role in shaping how people interacted with each other on a daily basis. Let's imagine that you are part of a community living in one of these homes. You wake up early in the morning as the cool air from the outside world tries to creep in. But the earth keeps you warm. The fire crackles in the hearth, already catching the attention of those closest to it, gathering for warmth, light, and food. In a space like this, the distinction between individual space and shared space often blurs. There are communal areas for cooking, gathering, and even sleeping. People move freely through the narrow tunnels, interacting constantly. The underground world is small, but it's full of life cooperation and shared responsibility. A mainstream historical fact is that this communal living arrangement was common in many ancient societies, especially in places where the environment was harsh. These close-knit communities were often bound together by a common purpose: survival. People relied on each other not just for warmth, but for food protection and emotional support. The success of these communities hinged on a collective effort, where every individual had a role to play. In these underground homes, this sense of community was more pronounced than in many above-ground settlements, where privacy and separation could lead to a more fragmented social structure. You might wonder then how privacy functioned in such a space. The truth is, privacy took on a different meaning in these underground dwellings. Families or entire groups of people lived together in a shared space, but that didn't mean everyone was constantly on top of one another. The design of the homes allowed for some degree of separation. Sleeping platforms might be arranged along the walls or in alcoves, providing each family or individual with their own corner of warmth and comfort. But despite this, the daily activities of the family and community were inextricably linked. There was no escaping the presence of others, but perhaps that was a benefit. Community members were always there to help one another with the work, and companionship was never far away. A quirky tidbit about these homes is that the close proximity of everyone living together meant that the skills and knowledge of the community were constantly shared. In these environments, there was little room for specialized tasks that only one person could do. Instead, everyone pitched in, whether it was gathering food, caring for children, or maintaining the structure of the home. Everyone was a part of the team. This constant interaction created a strong sense of belonging, where individuals were responsible for both the success of their own families and the well-being of the entire community. Historians still argue whether these communal arrangements were primarily driven by necessity or whether they reflected a broader cultural trend. It's possible that the social structures were shaped by both factors. On the one hand, communal living allowed families to stay warm and safe during long, harsh winters. On the other hand, these arrangements might have also been influenced by cultural norms where working together as a group was seen as an integral part of the way people lived. Regardless of the reasoning, one thing is clear: life in these underground homes was centered around cooperation, mutual aid, and a deep sense of responsibility toward one another. Now take a step back and think of how these communal spaces also encourage the passing of traditions and knowledge. In these homes, storytelling, tool-making, and food preparation were communal activities. Children learned from the adults around them, watching their parents and grandparents as they prepared meals or repaired tools. This constant flow of knowledge from one generation to the next meant that the skills needed to survive were passed down organically, without the need for formal education. Knowledge was shared through practice, not books, and this in turn helped to strengthen the community as each generation contributed to the well-being of the next. Interestingly, these underground homes also had a significant impact on the way rituals and traditions were practiced. In many cultures, these homes became places for communal gatherings where people would come together to celebrate the changing seasons, births, marriages, and even the passage of the dead. The earth itself, which provided warmth and shelter, became symbolic in many of these traditions. The act of living beneath the earth was seen as a deep connection to the past, to ancestors who had lived there before. These homes weren't just places of survival, they were sacred spaces full of meaning, history, and culture. As we continue to explore the development of these homes, we'll see how they weren't just practical responses to harsh climates, they were reflections of the values and traditions of the people who built them. These underground dwellings, with their communal spaces and shared responsibilities, helped to forge tight-knit communities that would persist for generations. And the connections between these communities and the earth itself ran deep, creating a bond that transcended the physical structure of the homes and reached into the spiritual and cultural life of the people who lived in them. As we move deeper into the history of these remarkable underground homes, it's essential to understand the role of fire. Fire was not just a source of light and warmth, it was the lifeblood of these homes. In a world where temperatures could plummet to deadly extremes, fire represented survival, community, and comfort. But the use of fire in these homes wasn't as simple as lighting a match. It had to be carefully controlled and contained, especially in an underground space where air circulation was limited, and excess heat or smoke could become dangerous. Picture yourself in the middle of a long winter's evening, huddled close to the hearth, the warmth of the fire seeping into your bones. The crackling flames cast a soft glow on the walls, and the air feels thick with the smell of wood smoke. There is something deeply comforting about the fire's presence, but there's also a sense of careful calculation. In these underground homes, fire wasn't just about warmth. It was about maintaining the delicate balance of temperature and air quality. If the fire was too big or too small, it could make the space either unbearably hot or filled with smoke, and without proper ventilation the air could become stale, making the situation dangerous. A mainstream historical fact about these underground homes is that the hearth was always centrally located. It was typically placed in the centre of the home, surrounded by stone or earth, to absorb and radiate the heat. The hearth was not just for cooking and warming, it was also a place for socialising. Families gathered around the fire to share meals, tell stories and pass the time during the long dark winters. It wasn't just about physical warmth, but emotional warmth as well, as the hearth became the heart of the home. In some cultures, the fire was built into the floor itself, often with a stone ring or a sunken pit to contain the flames. This arrangement ensured that heat was distributed evenly, and it also helped keep the smoke from accumulating in the living space. The smoke, which would have been dangerous in an enclosed environment, was carefully directed outside through chimneys or small vents. This meant that while the fire was essential for life, it had to be carefully maintained and monitored to prevent accidents. Scholars still debate how advanced these early fire management techniques truly were, while the basic idea of using fire to heat and cook seems simple. The methods used to control it were sophisticated and required an intimate knowledge of the environment. Some researchers suggest that these early fire management systems were the result of trial and error passed down over generations. Others believe that these techniques were intentionally designed and refined to ensure safety and comfort, a product of careful planning and foresight. Regardless of their origins, what is clear is that fire was integral to life in these underground homes, playing a central role in daily survival. A quirky detail to consider here is that in some regions the fire wasn't the only source of heat in the home. People also used a variety of other materials like hot stones, or even heated animal skins to supplement the warmth provided by the hearth. Hot stones, for instance, would be placed in a fire until they were glowing with heat, then carefully moved into the home to warm specific areas. These stones could be placed near sleeping platforms or storage areas to maintain warmth, without needing to constantly tend the fire. This ingenious approach to heating was just one more example of how people in these harsh environments were able to adapt to their surroundings and maximize the resources available to them. The use of fire also had a symbolic significance in many cultures. Fire was often seen as a sacred element associated with the sun, the hearth, and the cycles of life. In many traditions, the hearth represented the center of the home both physically and spiritually. It was the place where life began and ended. The ritual of tending to the fire was a form of respect for the elements and a way of honoring the earth that provided shelter. It was an act of cooperation between the people and the environment, a mutual exchange that ensured survival and prosperity. One of the challenges of living in these underground homes was maintaining a fire that could last throughout the night without consuming too much wood. In places where firewood was scarce, every piece had to be used wisely. People would gather wood carefully, using only what was necessary to keep the fire going. They also learned to make the most of other resources, such as animal fat or dried plants, to supplement their fuel supply. This careful stewardship of resources became second nature as people understood the importance of conserving what they had. Scholars still argue whether the use of fire in these underground homes had any long-term environmental impact. On one hand, fire provided essential warmth and light. On the other hand, the continuous use of fire for heating and cooking in a confined space could have contributed to deforestation in certain areas, as wood was often gathered in large quantities. However, the materials used in these homes were typically local and sustainable, and in many cases people would only take what they needed, ensuring that the environment was not overexploited. Looking at the long-term effects of this relationship between fire shelter and the environment, it's clear that the use of fire in underground homes was more than just a survival tactic. It was a reflection of the careful balance people had to maintain between their needs and the environment's resources. Fire was both a necessity and a privilege, one that had to be respected in order to ensure survival through the long winters. As we move forward, we'll see how fire and warmth continue to play a central role in the evolution of underground homes. These homes weren't just shelters, they were spaces where the elements came together in a delicate dance of survival. Whether through the careful management of fire, the ingenious use of thermal mass, or the cooperation of entire communities, these underground homes were a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. Fire in all its forms was at the heart of this struggle to survive and thrive in some of the harshest climates on Earth. Now that we have seen how fire played such an integral role in the lives of those living in underground homes, let's shift gears and focus on the people who actually built and lived in these structures. Who were the communities that used these homes as their shelters against the cold? How did they manage to maintain a delicate balance between the earth, the elements, and their everyday needs? If you step into one of these ancient communities, you would notice something truly remarkable: the ability to work together. The very design of these homes was built around cooperation. There was no way to survive in these extreme environments alone. Everyone played a role, whether it was gathering food, maintaining the fire, or caring for the living space. Families, extended families, and even entire villages often shared a single underground dwelling. The concept of privacy in these spaces was almost non-existent. The focus was on survival and the collective effort needed to thrive in a harsh environment. A mainstream historical fact here is that these underground communities were often part of larger cultural groups, and they were well adapted to the unique challenges of their environments. Whether in the Arctic Central Asia or parts of Europe, these societies developed complex social structures that helped them cope with the isolation and difficulties of their surroundings. From the Inuit in the far north to the Earth Dwellers in Turkey, these communities were marked by resilience and ingenuity. They weren't simply adapting to their environment, they were actively shaping their living spaces to create an environment that could withstand the most extreme conditions. At the same time, these societies often had strong spiritual beliefs that were tied to their surroundings. The earth was not just a source of shelter, it was a source of life. Many cultures believed that living underground, surrounded by the earth, brought them closer to their ancestors and to the natural forces that shaped their world. Some believed that the earth was a mother figure providing them with the resources needed to survive. Others saw it as a source of strength, sheltering them from the wrath of nature. Interestingly, scholars have long debated whether this connection to the earth was purely symbolic or whether it had practical implications for the way people viewed their relationship with the land. Some historians argue that the act of living underground, deeply embedded in the earth, was a way of demonstrating respect for the natural world. Others suggest that it was simply a response to the harsh conditions people lived in, where survival came first and symbolic acts came second. In any case, it's clear that the people who lived in these homes had a deep connection to the land that extended beyond simple shelter. A quirky tidbit is that some ancient underground homes even had small altars or sacred spaces built into the walls. These areas were often used for ritualistic purposes, where families would leave offerings to the spirits of the land or to their ancestors. Some of these homes had carvings or paintings on the walls which reflected the religious and spiritual beliefs of the people who lived there. The presence of these sacred spaces suggests that the underground home wasn't just a place for physical survival, it was a place of connection, reflection and meaning. For the people who lived in these homes, the space they inhabited was a living, breathing part of their cultural and spiritual identity. The use of these homes also had a profound impact on how these communities organized their daily life. Everyone had a role, but there was often a division of labor based on age, gender, and skill. Women might be responsible for food preparation, weaving, or caring for children, while men might focus on hunting, tool making, or managing the fire. Children were expected to help with chores as well, learning from a young age the skills necessary to survive in such a challenging environment. Education was not formalized in the sense we think of today. It was passed down through observation, imitation, and practice. The way a person lived, worked, and contributed to the home was the most important form of education. Historians still debate the extent to which these underground communities were egalitarian or hierarchical. Some suggest that these societies were relatively flat with little division between classes or social statuses. In such small, close-knit communities, it makes sense that people would be treated equally out of necessity. Everyone had to contribute to the collective effort. However, there is also evidence to suggest that some underground communities may have had a more complex social structure with leaders or elders taking on more prominent roles. These figures likely guided the community in both practical and spiritual matters, ensuring the survival of the group in a world that was often unforgiving. Another fascinating aspect of these communities was how they utilized available resources. For example, people in these regions would often use animal pelts, bones, and skins not only for warmth and clothing but also as construction materials. In some cases, animal bones were used to reinforce the structure of the homes, while skins were used as blankets or as insulation. Every part of the animal was put to use, ensuring that nothing was wasted. It was an incredibly resourceful way of living, where every material had a purpose and contributed to the larger goal of survival. The use of these materials also speaks to the deep connection people had to the animals they hunted. In some cultures, hunting was not just a practical activity but a spiritual one. Animals were seen as sacred and their parts were used with great respect. This respect was often reflected in rituals and ceremonies that honoured the animals and their spirits. People believed that by honouring the animals they would ensure a successful hunt in the future. The use of animal parts in construction and daily life wasn't seen as exploitation. It was a reciprocal relationship between humans and the natural world. As we continue to explore these underground homes, it becomes clear that they were far more than mere shelters. They were living expressions of the people who built them. They were places where survival, culture, spirituality, and community came together in a delicate balance. The homes were not just places to stay warm. They were spaces where people thrived, where traditions were passed down, and where relationships with the land and one another were deepened. And even though these homes have long since disappeared in many regions, their legacy lives on in the communities and cultures that continue to respect and honour the earth as a source of life shelter and survival. As we continue, let's explore how the design of underground homes evolved with time, and how the people who lived in these spaces adapted to their changing needs. Over centuries, the techniques and knowledge used to build these shelters became more refined. These homes were constantly being updated and altered to better serve their inhabitants as communities became more adept at using the earth to their advantage. Imagine a community living in the harsh, unrelenting cold surrounded by snowy plains or icy tundra. They have long mastered the art of survival. The first homes were simple, dug into the earth with thick walls designed to trap warmth. But as the community grew and the need for more space and better insulation arose, these homes became more sophisticated. The earth provided not only shelter, but the very materials they needed to create long-lasting, resilient structures. People learned to create multi-room dwellings with each room serving a specific function, sleeping, cooking, and even storage. The design of these homes wasn't just about survival. It was about creating comfort and stability in a world that could be unforgiving. A mainstream historical fact is that these evolving designs incorporated material that were naturally insulating, such as sodwood and stone, which became central to their structures. The construction process was a delicate art, with families working together to dig, shape, and reinforce the earth into usable space. Each home was an intricate balance between human labour and natural resources. But the most interesting aspect of this evolution was the development of the home's layouts. As people began to live in larger, more permanent settlements, the design of their underground homes began to reflect their changing social structures. Rooms were added for various functions, and heating systems were optimized to ensure that the warmth from the fire or sun was distributed throughout the house. In these larger homes, the division of space was not just practical but cultural. People started to designate certain areas of the home for specific uses, places for sleeping, for food preparation, for storage, and even for ritual purposes. This spatial division reflected the values and priorities of the community. While the design was still driven by the need to keep warm, it was now also shaped by the need for organisation, comfort, and cultural practices. The living space became a microcosm of the larger community, with each room serving as a reflection of the people's needs, beliefs, and way of life. A quirky detail is that in some areas people would even dig tunnels between homes, creating a network of interconnected dwellings. These tunnels allowed the people to travel from one home to another without ever having to step outside. In some cases, these underground communities became so interconnected that they resembled small self-contained villages. The ability to move between homes without braving the harsh conditions outside created a sense of safety and continuity. These underground villages were isolated from the outside world, yet deeply connected to each other, making them a tight-knit community that thrived in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Historians still argue whether these networks of tunnels were designed solely for practical reasons, or whether they also had a social or spiritual significance. Some researchers suggest that these tunnels were a way of building stronger communal ties, while others believe they may have had a more symbolic role. Tunnels could have represented connections between families, communities, or even generations. By physically linking homes together in this way, the people may have created a tangible representation of their interdependence and shared history. In this sense, the architecture of these homes didn't just serve a practical function. It also conveyed a sense of unity, strength, and continuity. Even with the advancements in architecture, however, the basic principles that guided the design of these underground homes remained the same. The focus was always on insulation, warmth, and protection from the elements. The materials used were chosen for their insulating properties, and the homes were designed to trap heat from the fire, the sun, or the earth itself. But as communities grew and evolved, the homes became more than just shelters. They became cultural hubs. Rituals, social activities, and communal decision-making often took place inside these homes. They were places of connection where people could come together to share not just warmth, but knowledge, stories, and traditions. The impact of this shared living space extended beyond just the physical structure. People living in these homes developed a unique set of survival skills, from hunting and food preservation to building and maintaining these complex underground spaces. Every member of the community had a role to play, and the cooperation required to thrive in these harsh conditions shaped social dynamics. In these environments, no one could afford to be isolated. Survival depended on mutual support, and that support created strong bonds between people. The underground homes in their evolution became not just shelters, but integral parts of the community's social fabric. As we look at these homes from a modern perspective, it's striking how advanced these ancient designs were. They were built to last and were deeply connected to the natural world. In a time when people had limited technology and resources, they demonstrated an incredible understanding of the environment and how to use it to create sustainable living spaces. The clever use of earth as insulation, the careful management of fire, and the thoughtful organization of space were all key to their success. A fascinating element of this long-term evolution of underground homes is how these building practices were passed down through generations. Knowledge about how to dig, how to work with earth and stone, and how to maintain warmth in an underground space didn't just come from experimentation. It was passed down through families and communities. This knowledge was oral, taught through practice, and refined over centuries. The fact that these skills were retained and adapted for so long speaks to the ingenuity and resilience of the people who lived in these homes. As we move forward, we'll see how the architecture of underground homes continue to evolve, adapting not just to environmental needs, but also to the changing social, cultural, and spiritual needs of the people. The very design of these homes, from their multi-room layouts to their interconnected tunnels, reflects a sophisticated understanding of both survival and community. The homes at their core were more than just physical structures. They were symbols of human resilience, ingenuity, and the deep connection between people and the earth. As we look deeper into the lives of those who inhabited these underground homes, it becomes evident that their relationship with the earth was not only practical, but spiritual. The earth was a provider, a protector, and an anchor in an unpredictable world. Living below the surface allowed these communities to remain sheltered from the violent extremes of weather that could sweep across the land above. But their connection to the earth went beyond mere survival. For many cultures, this way of life was deeply tied to their spirituality and understanding of the natural world. Imagine now that you are walking through one of these subterranean villages, your feet sinking softly into the earth as you enter another home. It feels quiet, almost sacred. The walls seem to hum with the warmth they have absorbed from the fire, and the air carries the scent of earth and smoke. There's a sense of permanence here, not just in the construction of the home, but in the community itself. This space carved into the earth was built not only to withstand the cold, but also to foster a deep connection between people, their surroundings, and their ancestors. In these homes, every stone, every layer of earth seemed to have meaning. A mainstream historical fact is that many cultures living in these underground homes viewed the earth as sacred, and living in harmony with it was a deeply held belief. The act of digging into the earth and making a home from it wasn't just a necessity, it was a spiritual practice. In some cultures, living in the earth was seen as a return to the womb, a place of safety, renewal, and rebirth. The earth was not just a physical resource, it was a living entity that people believed could offer protection and wisdom. This belief system shaped how people interacted with their homes, the materials they used, and the rituals they performed within these spaces. A quirky tidbit is that some of these homes contained shrines or sacred spaces within their walls. These areas were often simple, small niches carved into the stone or earth, where offerings might be left to honour the spirits of the land or ancestors. It wasn't uncommon for families to have a small area dedicated to spiritual practices, a place where the firelight flickered against the walls, casting long shadows and creating an atmosphere of reverence. These offerings weren't grandiose, but were intimate personal gestures made to honour the earth's power and the people who had come before. This act of connecting with the land through ritual gave the underground home a deeper spiritual significance. Historians still debate whether these rituals were universally practiced across different underground communities or whether they were specific to particular cultures. Some researchers believe that these rituals were a universal part of living underground as a way of connecting with the earth in a deeply symbolic way. Others argue that the spiritual practices were more region-specific, influenced by the unique beliefs and traditions of each culture. While there may be no definitive answer, it's clear that the idea of living in harmony with the earth was an important theme shared by many of these communities. As you walk deeper into one of these homes, you also begin to notice the way the environment is reflected in the craftsmanship. Every piece of furniture, every object, every part of the home seems to be built with a consciousness of the materials at hand. There are no unnecessary decorations. Everything has a function. The furniture made of wood or bone is simple yet practical. The walls are adorned with carvings or paintings that reflect the values of the community, sometimes depicting animals or symbols that held deep cultural or spiritual significance. The space is not cluttered with items for the sake of it. Each piece is a part of the larger whole, working together to create a space that is as functional as it is meaningful. The fire that burns in the hearth is another element that carries spiritual significance. It's not just a source of heat, it's a source of life. In many cultures, fire was associated with the sun and with vitality. The hearth was the heart of the home both physically and symbolically. It was where people gathered, shared meals, and connected with one another. In some cultures, fire was seen as a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual realm. The flames that flickered in the hearth represented both warmth and the passage of time, marking the rhythms of daily life. Scholars still argue whether the use of fire in these underground homes was more than just practical. Some researchers suggest that fire played an important role in religious rituals, acting as a conduit for spiritual connection. Others believe that fire was simply a tool for survival, and its spiritual significance was a later addition. Whatever the true nature of its role, it's undeniable that fire was a key element in these homes both practically and symbolically. Now, take a moment to think about how these communities managed to preserve their way of life over generations. The underground homes were passed down from one generation to the next, each family adding their own layer of experienced knowledge and adaptation. These homes were living spaces that changed over time, evolving with the needs of the people. As the environment changed, so too did the homes, reflecting a dynamic relationship between the people and the land they lived on. One of the remarkable aspects of these homes is how they embodied sustainability. In an era when the resources were limited, these homes were built to be as efficient as possible. Nothing was wasted. The materials used were carefully chosen for their durability and insulating properties. Every part of the home had a purpose, and the people who lived there were experts in maintaining and reusing the materials around them. This emphasis on sustainability extended beyond the homes themselves. The way food was stored, how animals were hunted and used, and even how the fire was managed, all reflected a deep understanding of the need to live in balance with the environment. As we move forward in our journey, we'll begin to see how the principles of underground living, sustainability, community, and respect for the earth continue to influence modern architecture and design. The lessons learned from these ancient homes are still relevant today as we look for ways to build homes that work with the environment rather than against it. In a world that increasingly values sustainability, the legacy of these underground homes serves as a reminder of how people have always looked to the earth for shelter and guidance. As we continue our exploration of these underground homes, it's important to recognize that their role in the daily lives of their inhabitants went far beyond providing warmth and protection. They were also places of innovation and resourcefulness. These homes were designed with a deep understanding of the environment and the needs of the people. The construction and design of these spaces reflected a unique blend of practical necessity and creativity, as inhabitants worked with the materials around them to create homes that were not only functional but efficient and sustainable. Imagine walking into one of these homes. The air is thick with the smell of earth and smoke, but it's warm and the fire in the hearth crackles softly. The walls made of earth or stone seem to hold the warmth in creating a sense of security that would be impossible to find in the harsh environment outside. You notice how everything is carefully organized. There is a place for everything, and every item serves a purpose. This was not a place for excess. There was no room for superfluous decoration. The space was as efficient as the people who lived there. A mainstream historical fact is that the design of these underground homes was often dictated by the environment. The harsh winters in places like the Arctic and Central Asia meant that people had to adapt quickly and efficiently. The materials they used, earth, stone, ice, were not just available, but ideal for creating structures that could withstand the cold. These homes were insulated from the extreme temperatures, with walls that absorbed and retained heat from the fire or the sun. This was a critical advantage in regions where temperatures could drop to life-threatening lows. The homes were built to keep the cold out and the warmth in creating a space that could support life even in the harshest conditions. At the same time, the simplicity of these homes didn't mean that they lacked complexity. The clever use of space and materials was an art form in itself. Tunnels were dug to connect homes, allowing people to move between spaces without braving the freezing cold. The central hearth was carefully placed to distribute warmth throughout the home, and ventilation shafts were included to ensure a constant supply of fresh air without allowing the cold to enter. Even the sleeping arrangements were designed with efficiency in mind. Sleeping platforms were placed along the walls to take advantage of the warmth from the earth, and blankets made from animal hides provided additional insulation. A quirky tidbit about these homes is the use of animal skins in their construction and furnishing. In some regions, entire homes were lined with animal pelts, not only for warmth, but also for their insulating properties. These skins were stretched across frames or draped over walls to keep the heat in and the cold out. In some cases, the skins were even used to create temporary walls dividing the home into sections. This gave families a sense of privacy and helped to regulate the temperature in different parts of the home. It's fascinating to think about how every part of the animal was used: skins for warmth, bones for tools, and meat for food. Nothing was wasted, and every part of the environment played a role in sustaining life. Historians still argue whether these homes were merely practical structures designed for survival, or whether they held deeper cultural significance. Some believe that these homes were viewed as sacred spaces where the earth itself was respected and revered. The act of digging into the earth to create a home was for many cultures an intimate and spiritual connection with the land. The underground home became a metaphor for the cycle of life and death, a place where the earth both protected and provided. Others suggest that the design of these homes was driven purely by necessity, with little thought given to the symbolic meaning of living beneath the earth. While there may never be a definitive answer, it's clear that these homes were far more than just shelters. They were deeply entwined with the cultural and spiritual fabric of the people who built them. Now let's step outside the confines of the home and think about how these underground living arrangements affected the communities that built them. Living underground wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was a way of life that shaped the way people interacted with each other and their environment. In these communities, everyone had a role to play and survival depended on cooperation. There was no room for isolation. People lived in close quarters and daily tasks were shared. This fostered a strong sense of community and interdependence. Interestingly, the tight-knit nature of these communities may have contributed to the preservation of knowledge and traditions. In environments where survival was the primary concern, knowledge about how to build homes, hunt, and preserve food was passed down from generation to generation. But it wasn't just practical knowledge that was preserved. In these underground homes, stories, rituals, and spiritual practices were also passed down, creating a rich cultural heritage. The close-knit nature of these communities allowed for traditions to thrive even in the harshest of environments. Scholars still debate whether these underground living arrangements were more conducive to community cohesion or whether they led to greater tension and conflict. Some argue that the close quarters promoted solidarity and cooperation as people had no choice but to work together. Others suggest that living in such confined spaces could lead to frustration and conflict as privacy was limited and personal space was scarce. Regardless of the outcome, it's clear that living underground required a high degree of cooperation and mutual respect, and these qualities played a crucial role in the success of these communities. As we move forward, we'll see how the principles of cooperation and sustainability that define these underground homes continue to resonate today. In modern times, we're increasingly aware of the need to live in harmony with the environment and to create sustainable, energy-efficient homes. The ancient builders of underground homes were ahead of their time, using the resources around them to create structures that were not only functional but deeply connected to the land. Their ingenuity and respect for the earth's power serve as a reminder that the lessons of the past can still inform our efforts to create a more sustainable future. As we continue to explore the ingenuity behind these underground homes, we now turn our attention to the materials used in their construction. The people who built these homes didn't have the luxury of modern construction tools or advanced building materials. Instead, they had to rely on what nature provided: earth, stone, wood, and sometimes even ice. What's most remarkable is how these materials were not only practical for survival, but also thoughtfully chosen to enhance the efficiency of the home. Imagine walking into one of these homes once it has been completed. The walls are made of thick, packed earth or stone, giving the home a sense of permanence and stability. The earth, which is a natural insulator, keeps the temperature inside constant regardless of the extremes outside. You can feel the subtle warmth of the space, the walls retaining the heat from the fire, keeping the cold at bay. The use of stone and earth was more than just a way to construct a sturdy shelter. It was an understanding of how materials could work together with the environment to create a balanced, self-sustaining living space. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these underground homes were built into the sides of hills or dug into soft rock, which made construction easier and more efficient. The soft rock could be carved out while the surrounding earth provided natural insulation and structural support. In regions with an abundance of snow, such as the Arctic, people took advantage of the frozen ground, using blocks of ice to construct igloo-like homes. These homes, while temporary, were incredibly effective at trapping heat using the snow and ice as both construction material and insulation. A quirky tidbit about the construction of these homes is that in some places the construction wasn't limited to just building the walls and roof. People often created subterranean networks, tunnels, storage spaces, and even burial chambers that were connected to their homes. These tunnels were carefully planned, designed not just for practical reasons like food storage or keeping animals safe, but also as a way to keep the home warm. The temperature difference between the tunnels and the living space helped circulate warm air, and this natural flow of heat helped maintain a comfortable environment. Some tunnels even connected different households, creating an underground village where the community could remain insulated from the harsh external elements. Historians still debate whether the choice of materials and the construction techniques were primarily influenced by necessity, or if they had deeper cultural implications. Some researchers suggest that the materials used were simply the most available and practical options for survival chosen out of necessity. Others believe that these choices were deeply symbolic. In some cultures, using earth and stone to build a home was seen as a way of connecting to the land and the ancestors. Living beneath the earth wasn't just a practical solution, it was a way of honouring the natural world and the spirits that were believed to reside within it. The method of using local materials wasn't just a way to save resources, it was an understanding of the land's ability to provide. These communities learned to live in harmony with the environment using materials that were both sustainable and readily available. This resourcefulness wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was about understanding the delicate balance of nature and using what was at hand to create a lasting home. Now think about the other elements that made these homes livable. In the coldest regions, insulation wasn't just about walls. The roofs were designed to trap heat using layers of snow or sod to cover the top and keep the warmth inside. In some cases, the roofs were even designed to be slightly dome-shaped, helping to distribute the heat more evenly. These designs were not the product of trial and error. They were the result of generations of knowledge passed down from one community to the next. Each generation built upon the successes and failures of the previous one, fine-tuning their techniques and creating homes that could withstand the toughest conditions. In addition to their impressive structural designs, these underground homes were also practical in terms of storage. Given the scarcity of fresh food in many of these cold environments, people had to rely on preserved foods, such as dried meats, salted fish, and stored root vegetables. The homes were often equipped with storage areas that were dug into the earth itself, where the temperature remained cooler than inside the living space. These storage areas were typically built into the floor, or in small insulated rooms connected to the main living area. This clever use of space allowed the people to store food safely and access it easily, ensuring that they had enough to survive during the long winters. Scholars still argue whether the architecture of these homes was influenced by contact with neighbouring cultures, or if it was a result of independent development. While there are similarities between the homes built by different groups, such as the use of insulation and thermal mass, there are also distinct differences. Some suggest that the exchange of ideas between cultures, especially through trade routes, may have influenced how these homes were constructed. Others believe that the communities living in extreme climates independently developed similar solutions to the same survival challenges. Regardless of whether these designs were shared or independent, what's clear is that these homes were the result of deep cultural knowledge and practical ingenuity. As we look at these homes from a modern perspective, we can see how the principles behind them have influenced modern architecture, especially in the growing field of sustainable design. The use of natural materials, the emphasis on insulation and thermal mass, and the focus on creating energy-efficient homes are all concepts that have been rediscovered in recent years. The ancient builders of underground homes were in many ways ahead of their time, understanding principles that are only now being fully appreciated in the context of modern sustainable living. Looking back at the way these homes were built, we can also see how they were not just designed for survival, they were built to last. These homes were an expression of the people who lived in them, reflecting their values, their creativity, and their deep connection to the earth. They were not temporary shelters, they were long-term solutions crafted with care and built to endure. The ingenuity of these ancient builders continues to resonate today, reminding us that the way we build and live is intricately tied to our relationship with the environment around us. As we step further into the lives of the people who inhabited these underground homes, we begin to see how their relationship with the environment influenced not only their architecture, but their entire way of life. These homes were not simply places of refuge, they were part of a deeper connection to the land, its resources, and the cycles of nature. Living underground wasn't just a matter of escaping the cold, it was about harmonizing with the natural world and shaping a life around its rhythms. Imagine living in a community where the very ground beneath your feet was both your protector and your sustenance. The soil, the stone, the snow, they all played a role in ensuring that life could continue despite the harsh environment. In these underground homes, the land was both a source of warmth and security. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a partner in survival. The people who lived in these homes understood the delicate balance of nature and adapted their lives to it. This was reflected in the way they used the land, carefully selecting the best materials and working with the natural features of the earth to create homes that were both functional and sustainable. A mainstream historical fact is that these homes were often built in regions where resources were limited. In the Arctic, for instance, there was little wood available, and the freezing temperatures made it impossible to grow crops. Yet the ingenuity of these communities meant they could make do with what the earth offered. They used ice, snow, and earth to create homes that provided warmth and shelter. The Inuit, for example, built igloos from blocks of compacted snow. The snow surprisingly acted as an excellent insulator, keeping the inside temperature relatively warm compared to the freezing temperatures outside. Similarly, in other cold regions, people used local stones and earth to create thick, sturdy walls that helped maintain a steady, livable temperature. As we look at these homes, we realize that it wasn't just the physical structure that was important, it was the lifestyle that these homes supported. People living in underground dwellings had to be self-sufficient. They couldn't rely on outside sources for survival. Everything they needed had to be sourced from the land and shared within the community. This created a strong sense of interdependence. Everyone in the community had a role to play, and their lives were shaped by the need to work together to ensure survival. The long winters demanded cooperation, with people relying on one another for warmth, food, and emotional support. A quirky detail to consider is that in many of these underground homes, the spaces were often shared by multiple generations. The elderly, the young, and the middle-aged lived in close quarters, with the shared space fostering a sense of familial and community bond. This intergenerational living created opportunities for knowledge and traditions to be passed down naturally. The older generation taught the younger one how to hunt, how to gather food, how to maintain the fire, and how to work with the land. In this way, knowledge was transmitted through lived experience, making survival skills an integral part of family and community life. Historians still debate whether this close living arrangement was as harmonious as it might seem. Some yet argue that such confined spaces may have led to tension and conflict, especially given the lack of privacy and personal space. Others believe that the necessity of cooperation in such a harsh environment helped foster strong supportive relationships. What's clear is that living in such close quarters required patience, understanding, and a shared sense of purpose. It wasn't just the architecture that kept these communities thriving, it was the spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. Another fascinating aspect of life in these underground homes was the way people adapted their daily routines to fit the rhythms of their environment. The extreme cold meant that people had to be incredibly resourceful, especially when it came to food. Food preservation techniques such as drying, salting, and smoking were essential for survival. People would prepare for the long winter months by hunting, fishing, and gathering as much food as possible. They would store food in cool underground cellars or burrows, where the temperature remained relatively stable. In some cases, food would be buried in the earth, where the constant temperature helped prevent it from spoiling. Interestingly, scholars still debate whether the people living in these underground homes ever had access to fresh food during the winter months. Some argue that the cold climate made it nearly impossible to grow anything during the long winters, while others suggest that certain types of root vegetables or hardy plants could have been cultivated in be it underground gardens or greenhouses. Regardless, the focus was always on resourcefulness. Every scrap of food was used and nothing went to waste. Even the bones and hides of animals were repurposed for tools, clothing, or insulation. As we move forward, we begin to see how the design of these underground homes wasn't just a practical solution, it was part of a broader worldview. The people who built and lived in these homes saw themselves as part of a larger interconnected system. They understood that the earth provided them with everything they needed, and they respected that relationship. The underground homes were not just shelters, they were a reflection of a lifestyle based on balance, cooperation, and respect for the land. In today's world, we often take our homes for granted. But these ancient underground homes remind us of the ingenuity and resilience required to live sustainably. They were built not just to survive in extreme conditions, but to thrive, creating communities that were interconnected, resourceful, and deeply rooted in their environment. Their legacy offers valuable lessons for us today as we face our own challenges of sustainability, climate change, and the need to reconnect with the natural world. As we move toward the end of our journey through these underground homes, we begin to see that they were not simply a product of their time. They were a product of human creativity, determination, and a deep connection to the earth. These homes remind us that no matter how harsh the environment there is, always a way to adapt, survive, and build a life in harmony with nature. As we continue our journey through the fascinating world of underground homes, it becomes clear that these dwellings were much more than functional shelters. They were an expression of a deep connection between people and the land that sustained them. The people who lived in these homes didn't just build structures to survive, they crafted environments that were carefully integrated with the natural world around them. The design of these homes was not only about keeping the cold at bay, it was about aligning their living spaces with the rhythms of nature, using available resources to create sustainable, self-sufficient communities. If you stand within one of these underground homes, you can almost feel the connection to the land. The walls made of earth or the stone feel like they are part of the earth itself. The temperature is consistent, neither too hot nor too cold, and the warmth from the hearth gently radiates throughout the space. The feeling of being nestled within the earth is both comforting and grounding. In these homes, the earth itself becomes a partner in survival, not just a passive backdrop, but an active participant in maintaining warmth, shelter, and security. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these underground homes were built into hillsides or cliffs, taking advantage of the natural contours of the land to provide insulation. By building into the earth rather than above it, people were able to create homes that were protected from the elements. The earth acted as a natural barrier against extreme temperatures, wind and snow, making these homes far more effective at maintaining a stable temperature than above-ground structures. The use of natural land features wasn't just a practical choice, it was an instinctive understanding of how to work with nature to create the most efficient and sustainable living spaces. A quirky tidbit worth noting is that in some of these communities, people didn't just use the earth for walls and insulation. They also incorporated the landscape into their daily routines. For example, some groups would create sunken gardens or small courtyards adjacent to their homes, using the earth's natural warmth to grow food during the warmer months. These gardens, while modest, provided an essential source of fresh produce, helping to supplement the preserved food stored in underground cellars. In a way, these underground homes were a reflection of an entire way of life, a life that sought to work in harmony with the land and its resources. Scholars still debate whether these homes were primarily designed for efficiency and survival, or if they also reflected a deeper philosophical or spiritual connection to the land. Some argue that the use of earth and stone in construction was not just a practical decision, but a reflection of a worldview in which the land was seen as sacred. For many cultures, the earth was not merely a resource to be used, but a living entity with which they shared a symbiotic relationship. Living beneath the earth was in this sense not only a way to escape the cold, but a way of aligning themselves with the forces of nature. Others believe that the primary motivation for building underground was simply survival. The extreme cold and harsh winters of certain regions required innovative solutions for housing, and living underground offered the most practical and efficient way to stay warm. However, even if the primary motivation was practical, the symbolism of living in harmony with the earth may have naturally emerged over time. The use of earth as a building material, the careful placement of homes within the landscape, and the reverence for nature all point to a deep cultural connection to the environment. The fascinating thing about these homes is that their design and construction were not only shaped by necessity, but by the knowledge passed down through generations. Each community developed its own methods and techniques for building these underground dwellings based on the environment, available materials, and cultural traditions. This knowledge was passed down through experience, observation, and teaching, ensuring that the skills required to survive in these harsh environments were preserved. As these communities evolved, the designs of their homes became more sophisticated, incorporating new materials and techniques to improve efficiency and comfort. A fascinating aspect of these homes is that the very act of living underground often led to the creation of close-knit cooperative communities. In environments where survival depended on collaboration, families and neighbours worked together to ensure that everyone had access to food, warmth and shelter. Social roles were often shared, with everyone contributing to the upkeep of the home, the gathering of food and the management of resources. This collective spirit helped to forge strong social bonds, making the survival of the group a shared responsibility. In many ways, living in an underground home was a lesson in interdependence. Historians still argue whether the communal aspects of underground living were a result of necessity, or whether they reflected a deeper cultural value placed on cooperation and family. Some suggest that these close-knit communities were born out of practical necessity. There simply wasn't room for isolation in such harsh conditions. Others believe that these communal bonds were an inherent part of the culture, a value that was reinforced by living in such confined, interconnected spaces. Regardless of the reason, it's clear that these homes fostered a unique sense of togetherness, where the well-being of each person was directly tied to the well-being of the entire community. As we continue our exploration, we see that the underground home was not just a place of shelter, it was a way of life that shaped the social, cultural and spiritual aspects of the community. These homes were built from the earth, and in a sense the people who lived in them were as much a part of the land as the earth itself. The use of natural materials, the careful design of the spaces, and the cooperative spirit that defined these communities all point to a profound connection between humans and the land. Looking back, it's clear that the lessons learned from these ancient underground homes are more relevant today than ever before. In a world where we're increasingly concerned with sustainability and environmental stewardship, the principles of building in harmony with the earth serve as a timeless reminder of how human ingenuity can create solutions that not only meet our needs but also respect the natural world. These underground homes, born out of necessity, became lasting symbols of resilience, creativity, and the deep bond between people and the earth that sustains them. As we continue, it's impossible to ignore the lasting legacy of these underground homes. While many of these structures have long since been abandoned or replaced, the principles that guided their construction continue to resonate today. In fact, modern architects and designers are looking back at these ancient homes to inspire sustainable, energy-efficient designs that work with the environment rather than against it. The lessons of the past are proving to be incredibly relevant as we face modern challenges related to climate change, resource scarcity, and the need for more sustainable living solutions. Imagine standing in a modern city surrounded by towering buildings, glass windows, and steel frames. Now picture the opposite, a small earth-sheltered home that blends seamlessly into its natural surroundings. This isn't a fantasy, it's the future of architecture. Many architects are now turning to earth-sheltered designs as a way to reduce energy consumption and create homes that are more in tune with the environment. These homes, much like their ancient counterparts, are built into the earth using its natural insulating properties to maintain a steady temperature year-round. They require less energy to heat and cool, making them far more energy efficient than traditional buildings. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient underground homes were the ultimate example of sustainable living. The people who built these homes understood how to work with the environment using natural materials and resources to create homes that could withstand extreme temperatures without relying heavily on external energy sources. This ancient wisdom is now being rediscovered by modern architects who are increasingly focused on creating homes that are both energy efficient and environmentally friendly. One interesting aspect of this resurgence in earth-sheltered homes is how they're being used in places that are vulnerable to climate change. Coastal communities facing rising sea levels or regions suffering from extreme heat are turning to earth-based designs as a way to build more resilient structures. By burying homes in the earth or using the earth as insulation, these communities are creating spaces that are naturally protected from the elements. It's a striking example of how ancient building techniques can provide solutions for modern problems. A quirky tidbit about these modern adaptations is that many of the earth-sheltered homes being built today are designed to look like traditional homes, blending in with the landscape rather than standing out. With advancements in construction materials, these homes can be made to resemble the same comfortable, aesthetically pleasing homes that we're used to, but with the added benefit of natural insulation and energy efficiency. The use of earth and stone to create an aesthetically pleasing, sustainable home has sparked a renewed interest in green architecture, with more and more people looking for ways to reduce their environmental footprint. Scholars still debate whether this renewed interest in earth-based architecture is a genuine shift towards sustainability or simply a passing trend. Some argue that while these homes are undoubtedly more energy efficient, they might not be a feasible solution for mass housing or urban environments. Others believe that the principles behind earth-sheltered homes could be applied to modern construction on a larger scale, providing a sustainable alternative to traditional building methods. Regardless of where the debate lands, what's clear is that ancient underground homes have made a profound impact on the way we think about architecture today. As we reflect on the principles behind these ancient homes, we can see that they were designed not just to meet the immediate needs of the people who built them, but to work in harmony with the environment over the long term. These homes were resilient, sustainable, and energy-efficient qualities that are sorely needed in the modern world. By looking back at the ingenuity of the past, we can find solutions to the pressing challenges of today, ensuring that we build a future that respects the natural world and uses its resources wisely. The resurgence of interest in earth-sheltered homes is part of a broader movement towards sustainability that's gaining momentum worldwide. From renewable energy to sustainable building materials, more and more people are realizing the importance of living in a way that minimizes harm to the planet. The lessons we can learn from the builders of ancient underground homes are an invaluable part of this movement. They remind us that working with the earth rather than against it is the key to creating homes that are not only sustainable but resilient in the face of changing environmental conditions. Looking forward, the principles behind underground home sustainability, resourcefulness, and adaptability are more important than ever. Whether it's through the construction of earth-sheltered homes, the use of natural building materials, or the emphasis on community-based living, these ancient designs offer a glimpse into a future where human ingenuity and the natural world coexist in harmony. The lessons of the past are guiding us toward a future where our homes are not just places of shelter, but a reflection of our relationship with the earth. As we conclude our journey through the history of underground homes, we're reminded that these structures were more than just practical solutions to extreme conditions. They were a testament to the resilience, creativity, and deep connection between people and the land. The legacy of these homes lives on not just in the buildings they left behind, but in the principles that continue to inspire modern architecture. In a world that faces unprecedented challenges, we can look to the past for solutions that will help us build a more sustainable, harmonious future. As we continue our exploration of underground homes, let's take a closer look at how these ancient structures have influenced modern thinking in areas beyond architecture. The principles behind their construction go hand in hand with the growing interest in sustainable living and eco-conscious practices. As the world grapples with issues like climate change, resource depletion, and overpopulation, these underground homes remind us that solutions to these problems have been quietly present in history all along. Imagine now that you are looking at a modern home that is carefully designed to work with nature, built with energy-efficient materials and insulation techniques that minimize the use of electricity and fossil fuels. This modern home draws inspiration from the underground structures of ancient civilizations. The very idea of using the earth to naturally insulate a living space has made a comeback in the design Nouvelle, as it offers a practical solution to reduce energy consumption. A mainstream historical fact is that these ancient underground homes were the first energy-efficient designs created long before the advent of modern technology or understanding of green building practices. The insulation provided by the earth, the use of materials like stone and earth itself, and the clever design of multi-room homes that kept heat circulating, all these elements are now reappearing in modern sustainable architecture. People are turning to these ancient methods as a way to live more sustainably in the face of today's environmental challenges. A quirky tidbit is that while we think of underground homes as a primitive solution, modern architects are now studying how these ancient designs can be adapted to urban environments. In some cities, architects are exploring the possibility of creating earth-sheltered homes that integrate with green spaces like parks or hillsides. These homes would have the same insulating properties as ancient underground dwellings, while also being designed to blend in with their surroundings, reducing the visual impact of urban development. Historians still argue whether the revival of these underground living techniques is a true step towards sustainable living or simply a niche trend. Some suggest that the design, while useful in rural areas or colder climates, may not be practical in more temperate or urban settings. Others point out that the principles behind these homes, using earth for insulation, conserving resources, and minimizing energy consumption, are exactly what we need in today's world. As we look at these ancient homes through the lens of modern sustainability, we can see that the wisdom embedded in their construction is more relevant now than ever. What's perhaps most fascinating about these ancient underground homes is how they were designed with a complete respect for the environment. People didn't just take from the land, they worked with it. They didn't fight the forces of nature, they adapted to them. In modern architecture, we often talk about energy-efficient homes and green building practices, but these ancient homes were sustainable without the technology we rely on today. People built their homes using what was available: stone, earth, snow, and ice, and used these materials to create efficient, self-sustaining spaces. These homes weren't just about survival in extreme conditions, they were about thriving, about creating harmony between human needs and the natural world. Looking at these homes today, we see how they embody the principles of passive solar design, natural insulation, and thermal mass, all of which are now foundational in eco-friendly building practices. The walls of an earth-sheltered home absorb and store heat, keeping the interior warm in winter and cool in summer. The compact design reduces the need for excessive heating and cooling, while the earth itself acts as a natural temperature regulator. This kind of energy-efficient design is not a modern invention. It's a principle that was practiced by ancient builders who lived in harmony with the land. A thought-provoking aspect of this connection between ancient and modern architecture is how these homes reflect our changing attitudes towards sustainability. In a time when we are increasingly aware of the environmental impact of our actions, looking to the past for solutions seems like a logical choice. The ancient underground homes were built with an understanding that living in balance with the earth was essential for survival. Today, as we face rising global temperatures, energy shortages, and environmental degradation, we can take inspiration from these ancient builders and look to their methods for guidance. Scholars still debate whether we can truly replicate the success of these ancient homes in the modern world. Some argue that modern technology and materials have provided us with better solutions, while others believe that the principles behind these underground homes, using natural resources, minimizing waste, and reducing energy consumption, are more relevant than ever. Regardless of where the debate lands, it's clear that the past holds valuable lessons for our future. The designs of these underground homes offer us a glimpse into a more sustainable way of living, one that respects the environment and strives for balance. As we move forward, the legacy of these homes is shaping how we think about living spaces. There is a growing trend toward creating homes that are not only energy efficient but also integrated into the landscape. Architects and builders are learning from the past using techniques like earth sheltering and passive solar design to create homes that use less energy and have a smaller environmental footprint. These modern homes may look different from the ones built by ancient civilizations, but the principles behind them remain the same. It's a reminder that in many ways the future of sustainable living is rooted in the past. In conclusion, these ancient underground homes serve as a powerful reminder of how human ingenuity and respect for the earth can work together to create homes that are both functional and sustainable. By looking back at these structures, we can find inspiration for creating a future where architecture works with nature, not against it. The wisdom of these ancient builders passed down through generations can continue to guide us as we strive to live in greater harmony with the environment and ensure that the homes we build today are ones that can be sustained for future generations. As we continue our journey through the world of underground homes, let's explore the practical challenges faced by the people who lived in these unique dwellings. While these homes were marvels of design and ingenuity, they were not without their difficulties. The earth, stone and ice that provided insulation and protection from the cold also came with their own set of challenges. Living underground demanded a careful balance between comfort and survival, and the people who built these homes had to adapt to a variety of obstacles from ventilation problems to maintaining proper temperature regulation. Picture yourself living in one of these homes surrounded by thick walls of earth, stone or ice. The temperature is relatively stable inside, but it's not always as comfortable as it seems. The fire burning in the hearth provides warmth, but it needs to be carefully managed to avoid overheating the space or filling it with smoke. The air is thick with the scent of wood, animal fat and earth, but it's also heavy and musty, a reminder that the space is sealed off from the outside world. Ventilation was a constant concern, and without proper airflow, the air inside these homes could become stale, making it difficult to breathe, especially during the long winters. A mainstream historical fact is that many ancient underground homes had ventilation shafts or flues to draw in fresh air from outside and expel stale air from within. In some cases, these shafts were built into the walls or ceilings, allowing the air to circulate naturally. These ventilation systems were not only essential for ensuring a steady supply of fresh air, but also for maintaining a proper temperature inside the home. If the air was too stagnant or the temperature too hot, the risk of suffocation or heat exhaustion increased. The challenge was finding the perfect balance between warmth and air quality, something the builders of these homes learned to manage through trial and error. One of the challenges of living in such an environment was the lack of natural light. The people who built these underground homes had to adapt to a life without sunlight, which could be disorienting and difficult to manage, especially during the long winter months. While the fire in the hearth provided some light, it was often dim and flickering, casting shadows on the walls. To compensate for the lack of light, many underground homes incorporated small windows or openings, often covered with animal skins or wood, to allow in some natural light during the day. These windows, however, were small as they needed to be sealed to protect from the cold and wind. Some cultures also used reflective surfaces or mirrors to direct any available light deeper into the home, maximizing the natural light that entered. A quirky tidbit is that some cultures created special lighting systems inside their underground homes. They used materials like whale oil fat or plant oils to fuel lamps that could be placed around the house to provide light during the dark winter months. These lamps weren't just functional, they also served as a source of heat. In some cases, they were strategically placed near walls or in specific areas of the home to help warm the space and make it more comfortable to live in. The lamps also had an important social function as people gathered around them to each share stories or perform rituals. In this way, even something as simple as lighting became part of the social fabric of these communities. Historians still argue whether these underground homes were always seen as permanent residences, or if they were more temporary shelters used during certain seasons. Some suggest that these homes were meant to be lived in year-round, with people returning to them after hunting or fishing trips. Others believe that many of these homes were only used in the harshest parts of the year, during the long winter months when the cold would make it nearly impossible to live above ground. The truth is likely a combination of both these homes were adaptable, built to accommodate changing needs and varying conditions. The complexity of these homes also extended to their maintenance. Living in a structure built from earth, stone and ice meant that regular upkeep was necessary. The materials could erode, the fire pits could become clogged, and the ventilation systems could get blocked. To maintain these homes, inhabitants had to be skilled in a variety of tasks. They had to repair cracks in the walls, clear debris from the ventilation shafts, and regularly rebuild the hearths to ensure that they functioned properly. The people who lived in these homes didn't just build them. Once they had to continually maintain and adapt them, a process that required knowledge passed down through generations. Another challenge of underground living was the risk of collapse. While these homes were designed to be structurally sound, the earth and ice around them were not always stable. In some regions, thawing ground or shifting ice could cause the walls to cave in. To mitigate this risk, people developed methods of reinforcing the walls using stones or wooden beams to hold the earth in place. In more unstable regions, the homes were built deeper into the ground to avoid the risk of collapse while still keeping the temperature regulated. A lesser-known aspect of these underground homes is how they were also a way to protect inhabitants from the dangers outside. The earth provided a natural barrier shielding the people from predators, enemies, or even natural disasters. In some cultures, living underground was seen as a way to remain hidden from external threats, offering a sense of security that would have been difficult to achieve with above-ground dwellings. In this way, these homes were not only a refuge from the cold, but a sanctuary offering protection and safety to the inhabitants who lived there. Scholars still debate whether the risk of collapse or the need for maintenance was a major factor in the eventual decline of underground living. Some argue that over time, as people moved away from isolated, harsh environments, the need for underground homes diminished. Others suggest that as building techniques and materials improved, people simply moved to above-ground structures that were easier to maintain and offer more comfort. Regardless, what is clear is that underground homes were once a crucial part of survival for many cultures and communities. They provided warmth, safety, and comfort in environments where above-ground homes would have been far too vulnerable. As we conclude our exploration of these ancient homes, we are left with a sense of awe at the adaptability and resourcefulness of the people who built them. These underground homes were not simply shelters. They were symbols of resilience, ingenuity, and a deep connection to the earth. They remind us that when faced with adversity, people can find innovative ways to survive and thrive. And as we look to the future, the principles behind these homes can inspire new ways of thinking about sustainability, community, and the role of architecture in our lives. As we reflect on the deep connection between these underground homes and the people who lived in them, we begin to see how they shaped more than just survival. These homes were reflections of the values and ways of life of the cultures that built them. They were environments where the practical and spiritual intersected. For many of these communities, the act of living underground was not just about staying warm and protected. It was about creating a space that reflected their relationship with the earth, their ancestors, and the natural world. Imagine now that you are in the heart of one of these homes surrounded by the cool earth. It's not just a physical shelter, it's a sanctuary. The earth itself holds you, providing warmth, security, and protection. You can feel the presence of the land as though it's alive with energy. This connection to the earth was not only about survival, but also about spirituality. Many cultures believe that by living underground, they were bringing themselves closer to their ancestors or the spiritual forces of the world. The act of digging into the earth was seen as a return to a more primal state where people could connect with the very foundation of life. A mainstream historical fact is that in many of these underground communities there were sacred spaces within the homes. These areas were often small alcoves or niches carved into the walls where offerings could be placed or rituals performed. The earth itself was viewed as a living entity, and by living within it, people sought to align themselves with its energy and wisdom. Some cultures even believed that the earth's protective qualities extended beyond the physical realm, offering spiritual protection as well. These underground homes then were not just a place to live, they were sacred spaces where life, death, and everything in between could be experienced in harmony. A quirky tidbit to consider is that in certain regions, these underground homes also became spaces of storytelling and oral traditions. With limited space and privacy, people gathered together around the hearth, sharing stories, songs, and legends passed down from generation to generation. The act of gathering around the fire was not only about staying warm, it was a cultural and social event, one that strengthened the bonds between family members and neighbours. Stories of ancestors, the land, and spiritual beliefs would be shared in these underground spaces, keeping traditions alive even in the most isolated environments. Scholars still debate whether these spiritual practices tied to the underground homes were widespread or unique to certain regions. Some suggest that the idea of living in harmony with the earth and using the home as a place of spiritual connection was common among cultures that practiced underground living. Others believe these practices were more localized, specific to groups that lived in the harshest environments where such beliefs may have been born out of necessity and cultural adaptation. Either way, it's clear that the design of these homes was influenced by far more than just the need to survive the cold. It was influenced by a worldview that saw the earth as sacred and the act of living within it as a profound experience. The designs of these homes were also shaped by the social structures of the communities. In many cases, these homes were shared spaces where extended families or entire villages lived together. The layout of the homes, often built around a central hearth or communal area, encouraged cooperation and interdependence. There was little room for isolation in these spaces. Everyone was interconnected both physically and socially. The arrangement of the living spaces fostered a sense of community where everyone had a role to play in ensuring the survival and well-being of the group. Historians still argue whether this communal living was a result of necessity or whether it reflected a cultural ideal. Some believe that living in these tight-knit communities was a direct response to the extreme conditions of the environment where cooperation was essential for survival. Others suggest that these communities embraced the idea of interconnectedness as a cultural value where collective well-being was prioritized over individual needs. Regardless of the reasons behind it, what's undeniable is that these underground homes helped foster a strong sense of social unity. In many cases, they were places where people came together not just to survive but to thrive as a community. As we look at these ancient homes today, we can't help but marvel at their complexity. These homes were far more than just shelters. They were living spaces that embodied the cultural, spiritual, and social practices of the people who built them. The design of these homes reflected a deep understanding of the environment, the need for cooperation, and the connection to the land. They were a testament to the resilience and creativity of the people who lived in them, who found ways to not only survive but to create meaningful, sustainable lives in some of the harshest environments on Earth. A fascinating aspect of these homes is how they continue to inspire modern architects and builders. The principles of sustainability, resourcefulness, and cooperation that were embodied in these ancient homes are becoming more relevant as we face the challenges of the modern world. In a time when we are looking for ways to reduce our environmental impact and live more sustainably, the lessons from these underground homes offer valuable insights. The use of local natural materials, the focus on energy efficiency, and the integration of the environment into the design of the home are all principles that are gaining traction in modern architecture. As we look to the future, we can learn much from the ancient builders who lived in underground homes. They faced extreme challenges, but they didn't just adapt, they thrived. They worked with the land using its resources wisely, and they built homes that were not only functional, but deeply connected to their culture and values. The legacy of these homes serves as a reminder that sustainable living is not a new concept, it's one that has been practiced for thousands of years. And as we face our own environmental challenges, we can look to these ancient homes for inspiration as we work toward building a more sustainable future. As we draw closer to the end of our exploration, it's important to reflect on how the underground homes we've studied represent more than just physical structures. These homes were carefully crafted to serve not only the immediate needs of survival, but also to embody the cultural, spiritual, and social fabric of the communities that built them. The way these homes were designed, constructed, and maintained reveals a profound understanding of the environment and a deep respect for the earth. Imagine now that you're standing outside one of these homes. The landscape is barren and cold with nothing but snow and ice as far as the eye can see. Yet beneath your feet an entire world exists hidden from view. Inside, the temperature is comfortable, the air steady and warm, and the flickering light from the hearth creates a sense of coziness in the otherwise harsh, desolate world. You realize that in many ways these homes were not just about creating shelter, they were about creating life within an unforgiving environment. They were spaces where people could rest, gather, and connect with one another, no matter how harsh the world outside may have been. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these homes were not just built as temporary shelters, but were long-term solutions. The people who lived in these underground homes weren't just looking to survive the cold, they were looking to create sustainable ways of life that could last through the seasons and the years. This meant that every part of the home, from the materials used to the design, was carefully thought out to maximize efficiency and comfort while minimizing the impact on the environment. In this sense, these homes were an early example of sustainable living. A quirky tidbit worth considering is the cleverness of these homes in terms of their design for food storage. In the frigid regions, food preservation was key to survival, and the underground environment provided the perfect conditions for storing food for long periods. In many homes, specialized storage areas were dug into the earth, where the temperature remained cool and sterile. These cellars were not just for storing food, but were also vital for preserving meat, fish, and vegetables that would otherwise spoil in the short, harsh growing seasons. The people living in these underground homes had mastered the art of food preservation long before modern refrigeration. Historians still argue whether the origins of these underground homes were purely functional, or if they were also influenced by cultural and spiritual beliefs. Some believe that the practice of living underground was purely a practical response to the challenges of extreme climates, while others suggest that there was a spiritual element to living within the earth. For many cultures, the earth was a powerful force, and living beneath its surface may have been seen as a way of returning to a primal connection with the land. The home wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a sacred space that allowed people to feel closer to their ancestors and to the natural forces that govern their world. The focus on creating homes that were in harmony with the environment is actually significant in the context of modern living. Today we face challenges related to climate change, resource depletion, and overpopulation. These issues require us to rethink the way we build and live in our homes. The ancient underground homes built to withstand extreme conditions offer valuable lessons for today's architects and designers. Their focus on sustainability, using natural materials and working with the land to create energy-efficient spaces is more relevant now than ever before. In fact, many of the principles that were used to build these ancient homes are being incorporated into modern sustainable building practices. Earth-sheltered homes, which use the insulating properties of the earth to maintain a stable temperature, are becoming increasingly popular in areas where energy efficiency is a top priority. The use of local materials, the focus on minimizing waste, and the emphasis on creating self-sustaining environments are all principles that have been rediscovered in the quest for sustainable living. As we move toward more eco-conscious building practices, the legacy of these ancient underground homes serves as a reminder that sustainability isn't a new concept. The people who lived in these homes understood the importance of living in balance with nature. They created homes that were not only functional but also reflective of their deep connection to the earth. Today we are rediscovering many of the same principles as we look for ways to reduce our carbon footprint and live more harmoniously with the planet. One of the most striking aspects of these underground homes is how they represent human resilience. The people who built them did not simply accept the harsh conditions of their environment, they thrived in them. Through creativity, resourcefulness, and a deep respect for nature, they created homes that provided safety, warmth, and comfort. Their ability to adapt to their surroundings is a testament to the human spirit, and its ability to overcome even the most extreme challenges. As we think about the future, we can look to these ancient builders for inspiration. The lessons they imparted through their architecture lessons about sustainability, cooperation, and respect for the environment are just as important today as they were thousands of years ago. The underground homes of the past remind us that we have the power to adapt to changing conditions, to create spaces that work with the environment, and to build lives that are sustainable and meaningful. In the end, these ancient underground homes were more than just shelters. They were reflections of the values and principles of the people who built them. They represented the harmony between humans and the natural world, a balance that allowed people to thrive even in the harshest of conditions. As we look to the future, we can use these homes as a model for how we can create a more sustainable, harmonious world. As we explore the enduring influence of underground homes, it's fascinating to realize that these structures weren't just built for the cold, they also reflect a profound understanding of human adaptability, community, and respect for the environment. The ingenuity behind these homes can be seen not only in the way they provided protection from the elements, but also in how they shaped the social, spiritual, and cultural lives of the people who lived in them. These homes were more than shelters. They were reflections of how people viewed their place in the world and their relationship with the land. Now imagine stepping into one of these homes after a long day in the harsh cold. You enter through a low doorway, bending slightly as you move into the warmth inside. The air is warmer here, and the flickering light of the fire greets you, casting a soft glow across the room. The warmth is not just from the fire, it's also from the earth itself, holding heat like a blanket wrapped around you. You feel the connection to the land beneath your feet. The thick walls made of earth or stone have absorbed the warmth during the day, and now they release it slowly into the living space. You are safe, sheltered, and secure. A mainstream historical fact is that these underground homes were built not only for protection against the cold, but also as a means of utilizing the Earth's natural insulating properties. Earth is an excellent thermal mass, meaning that it can store heat during the day and release it at night, ensuring that the temperature inside remains relatively stable. The more the builders understood this principle, the more they were able to create homes that worked in harmony with the environment, using the earth itself to regulate the internal temperature without relying on external energy sources. The cleverness of these designs is truly remarkable when you think about how the builders incorporated not just practicality, but ingenuity and resourcefulness into every element. Even the materials used were chosen for their effectiveness in maintaining warmth and ensuring the structural integrity of the homes. From stone walls that could trap heat to the use of wood and animal skins to insulate, these homes were masterpieces of survival built with the knowledge that the earth itself could be harnessed to create shelter. A quirky tidbit is that in many of these underground homes, people also used creative methods to store food and preserve it throughout the long winter. Storage areas were often dug into the ground, utilizing the earth's naturally cool temperature to keep food fresh. Some cultures even went a step further, burying food in specially designated underground chambers where the temperature remained consistent year-round. It wasn't just about keeping food cold, it was about storing enough to last through months of isolation. In many ways, these underground homes were microcosms of self-sufficiency, relying on the resources around them and ensuring that everything had its place. Historians still argue whether the function of these underground homes was purely based on practicality, or whether they also had a symbolic or spiritual role. Some suggest that the decision to live underground was primarily motivated by the need for shelter from extreme weather conditions and the desire to create a stable, insulated living space. Others propose that the act of living in the earth was also a spiritual decision, offering a deeper connection to the land and the ancestors who had lived there before. These underground homes could have been viewed as more than just a refuge from the cold. They may have represented a return to the earth, a symbolic act that brought people closer to their origins. The idea that living underground had a spiritual significance is further supported by the fact that in many cultures, these homes were constructed in ways that incorporated sacred spaces. Rituals, ceremonies, and offerings were common in these underground environments, with people using the earth itself to perform spiritual practices. Some homes contained niches carved into the walls where offerings were left to honor the spirits of the land. Others featured areas for communal gatherings where people would meet to share food, tell stories, and pass down traditions. The physical space, the very earth that surrounded them, became a conduit for connection between people, the environment, and the spiritual forces they believed in. A fascinating aspect of these underground homes is how they mirrored the values and social structures of the people who built them. The tight-knit nature of these communities was reflected in the design of the homes. Living in such confined spaces required cooperation and mutual reliance. Family members and neighbours worked together to maintain the home, gather food, and ensure the survival of the group. Social bonds were strengthened by this constant interaction, as there was no room for isolation in these underground dwellings. Whether in the coldest Arctic regions or the more temperate areas, these homes encouraged cooperation and a shared sense of responsibility. Scholars still debate whether the close quarters of underground living led to a more egalitarian society, or if these spaces created power dynamics within the community. Some suggest that the close living arrangements fostered equality, as everyone was forced to contribute to the well-being of the group. Others propose that even in these confined spaces, social hierarchies may have existed, with certain individuals or families taking on leadership roles. Regardless of the power dynamics, it's clear that the underground home itself played a major role in shaping the community's daily life. The design encouraged connection sharing and a deep sense of belonging. One of the most remarkable aspects of these underground homes is how they continue to inspire modern ideas about sustainability. In a world where the environmental impact of construction is a growing concern, the principles behind these ancient homes provide valuable insights. The use of natural materials, the emphasis on energy efficiency, and the ability to regulate the internal temperature using the earth itself are ideas that have been rediscovered in modern eco-conscious building practices. These homes, built with minimal external energy sources and an understanding of the environment, can be seen as early examples of green architecture long before the term even existed. As we look forward, these ancient underground homes offer lessons in how we can live more sustainably in the future. By embracing energy-efficient building techniques, using natural materials, and creating homes that work in harmony with the environment, we can move closer to creating a more sustainable future. The principles of living in balance with nature, respecting the Earth's resources, and fostering community connections are all practices that can help guide us in today's world. In the end, these underground homes were not simply shelters from the cold. They were reflections of human creativity, adaptability, and resilience. They were about more than just surviving harsh environments. They were about thriving within them. As we look to the future, we can take inspiration from these ancient designs and apply their principles to create homes that not only provide shelter, but also foster sustainable, harmonious living. As we look back on the legacy of these underground homes, we begin to see how their influence stretches beyond just architectural design. These homes were a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the people who built them. Their methods of utilizing the natural environment for survival serve as both a reminder of humanity's ability to adapt and a guide for how we can create more sustainable living spaces today. Take a moment to think about the world in which these people lived. The outside world was harsh and unforgiving, yet inside their underground homes, warmth and safety were constant. The thick earth or stone walls served as a barrier against the relentless winds, freezing temperatures, and unpredictable weather. These homes were built not just to protect from the cold, but also to offer a sense of permanence in an otherwise transient world. The earth beneath their feet was not only a foundation, it was a source of stability, warmth, and connection. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these homes, while incredibly advanced in their design, were also incredibly simple. They didn't rely on complex systems or imported materials. They were constructed from what was available in the immediate environment. The earth, stone, wood, and in some cases ice were the building blocks that allowed these homes to thrive in extreme conditions. It was a testament to the resourcefulness of the people who lived there, showing that the most effective solutions often come from using what you have and adapting it to your needs. A quirky tidbit worth noting is the way people living in these underground homes adapted their daily routines to match the natural rhythm of the earth. Since these homes were often built into hillsides or caves, there was little to no sunlight inside. To make up for this, people would often rise early and use what little daylight there was to gather food, hunt, or engage in other necessary activities. They used the warmth of the earth to regulate temperature and the fire in the hearth to provide light and warmth during the long nights. Their days were structured around the environment they inhabited, and the layout of the home helped them remain as efficient as possible. Historians still debate whether this reliance on natural resources and the environment was a deliberate cultural choice or simply a practical necessity. Some argue that these communities viewed their homes as places of spiritual connection with the earth. For them, living beneath the surface may have been a way to embrace a sense of harmony with nature and respect for the land's power. Others suggest that while spiritual beliefs likely played a role, the primary motivation for building underground homes was survival in extreme climates. In either case, the connection to the land and its resources was undeniable, and it shaped not just how people lived, but how they viewed the world around them. The practical ingenuity behind these homes didn't stop with their construction. The people who lived in these homes had to be constantly vigilant about the needs of their environment. Maintaining a steady temperature inside required not only managing the fire, but also taking care of the walls and structure of the home itself. The walls, often made from packed earth, had to be repaired regularly, and the fire needed to be carefully tended to avoid excessive smoke. The people who lived in these homes were not just passive inhabitants, they were active participants in maintaining their space. In addition to their role in the home's upkeep, these communities were also responsible for managing their food supply. During the coldest months, the scarcity of fresh food meant that people had to rely on preservation techniques such as drying, salting, or smoking. The underground home's natural insulation helped keep food fresh for long periods of the year, reducing waste and ensuring that the community had enough to survive. These homes weren't just shelters, they were systems that enabled survival by utilizing every available resource efficiently. Looking at these homes through a modern lens, it's easy to see how much we can learn from the past. Today we face many of the same challenges that ancient builders did, though perhaps not in the same extreme environments. The need for energy efficiency, sustainable living, and resource conservation has never been more pressing. The principles behind these ancient underground homes, working with the land using natural materials and living sustainably, are more relevant now than ever. Modern architecture and design can take cues from these early builders and apply their wisdom to create more eco-friendly, energy-efficient homes. A particularly exciting aspect of modern architecture is the growing interest in earth-sheltered and passive solar homes. Architects today are exploring the potential of building homes that blend into the landscape using the Earth's natural insulating properties to keep them warm in the winter and cool in the summer. These modern homes take the lessons of ancient underground dwellings and apply them to today's world, reducing energy consumption and minimizing the environmental impact of construction. Scholars still debate the extent to which ancient building methods should be incorporated into modern architecture. Some believe that we should continue to innovate with new materials and technologies, while others argue that revisiting ancient techniques such as earth sheltering could be key to building more sustainable homes for the future. Regardless of the debate, the fact remains that these ancient homes offer valuable insights into how we can create living spaces that are in harmony with the environment, designed to withstand both time and the elements. Reflecting on these homes, it's clear that they were more than just functional shelters. They were symbols of human resilience, creativity, and the deep bond between people and the earth. They remind us that we don't always need to look forward for solutions. Sometimes the answers lie in the past waiting to be rediscovered. By embracing sustainable building practices and learning from the ingenuity of our ancestors, we can build a future where homes are not just shelters, but part of a larger, more harmonious relationship with the world around us. As we continue to reflect on the value of these ancient underground homes, it becomes increasingly clear that they were more than just pragmatic structures. They were living expressions of culture sustainability and a deep understanding of the environment. The way they were designed and built speaks to an ancient wisdom that modern societies are only beginning to rediscover. In these homes, survival was not just about enduring the elements, it was about working with the earth to create a space that would thrive alongside nature. Take a moment to picture yourself living in one of these homes. The earth presses close all around you, offering warmth and protection. The fire crackles gently in the hearth, but it's the walls that really hold the warmth, keeping the air at a comfortable temperature, no matter what the wind or snow is doing outside. The walls themselves seem to be part of the earth, solid and secure, offering you not only protection from the cold, but also a deep sense of rootedness. These homes were not just shelters, they were deeply connected to the land that surrounded them. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these underground homes were built with an acute understanding of the land's resources. The earth, stone, and even ice were carefully selected for their insulating properties, ensuring that heat would be trapped within and the cold kept outside. These homes were designed to make use of natural thermal mass, meaning the earth itself acted as a battery storing heat during the day and releasing it at night to maintain a steady, livable temperature. It's fascinating how these builders with little more than rudimentary tools created homes that were energy efficient in ways we're still striving to perfect today. A quirky detail to consider is how some of these homes were built with ingenious natural features like using large flat stones to reflect heat from the fire deeper into the living space. These stones absorbed the heat during the day, and at night they would slowly release it, making the space warmer, without needing to keep a constant fire burning. In some cultures, even the small alcoves in the walls were designed to help distribute heat efficiently, ensuring that the living space stayed warm enough without burning excessive fuel. This deep knowledge of materials and their properties allowed people to use the resources they had to maximum effect. Historians still debate the role of these underground homes in shaping social structures within the communities that built them, and suggest that the close quarters of these homes led to more cooperative and egalitarian societies where survival depended on everyone working together. Others believe that even within these confined spaces there may have been distinct social roles, with elders or community leaders taking on more prominent positions. Regardless, it's clear that the very nature of underground living fostered a sense of shared responsibility and mutual reliance. In these homes, cooperation wasn't just a cultural value, it was a necessity. One of the most striking things about these homes is the deep sense of community they encouraged. In many cases, entire families and sometimes even multiple families lived together in the same underground dwelling. There was no space for isolation. Privacy was limited, and life revolved around the communal hearth. Meals were shared, stories were told, and knowledge was passed down from one generation to the next, all within the confines of these carefully constructed spaces. The physical closeness of the living arrangements required a level of cooperation and mutual respect that became central to the success of these communities. People had to look out for one another, share resources, and work together to keep the homes safe and functional. Scholars still argue whether the social structures in these underground homes were as simple as they appear, or whether they had complex hierarchies. Some believe that these societies were fundamentally cooperative, with everyone contributing equally to the group's survival. Others suggest that even in these intimate spaces there were power dynamics that influenced how decisions were made and resources were distributed. Regardless of these nuances, the communal aspect of these homes remains a defining feature. The bond between individuals and the shared responsibility for the survival of the group was built into the very design of these homes. Now think about how these homes were passed down from generation to generation. They weren't just structures that people built and abandoned after a few years. These homes were long-lasting, with each generation adding to or adapting the structure to meet their changing needs. The homes were a collective project with knowledge about building, maintaining and living in these spaces shared among family members and neighbours. This generational knowledge was invaluable, ensuring that each new generation could survive and thrive in the environment that their ancestors had learned to navigate. It's a beautiful example of how culture, survival skills and wisdom were intertwined, passed on not just in stories but in the very walls of these homes. A lesser-known fact is that many of these homes were built with materials that were not just functional but deeply symbolic. In some cultures, stones used in the construction were believed to carry the spirit of the land, while wood might have been viewed as representing the life force of the forest. These materials weren't just chosen for their practical benefits, they were seen as an extension of the community's relationship with the natural world. Living in harmony with nature wasn't just a physical necessity, it was a spiritual and cultural belief. Scholars continue to debate how these symbolic practices influenced the way people built their homes. Some suggest that these beliefs were deeply embedded in the building process, affecting everything from the selection of materials to the layout of the space. Others argue that these symbolic practices were secondary to the practical needs of survival. Regardless, the connection between the home and the land was undeniable, and it shaped not only the architecture of these dwellings, but the culture and spiritual practices of the people who lived in them. Looking at these ancient homes from a modern perspective, it's clear that the lessons they imparted are still relevant today. As we continue to face challenges related to climate change, resource depletion and urbanization, the principles behind these homes offer valuable insights into how we can build more sustainable, connected, and energy-efficient spaces. The use of natural materials, the emphasis on energy efficiency, and the focus on community and shared responsibility are all concepts that are still being applied in modern green architecture. In conclusion, these underground homes were more than just shelters. They were expressions of human creativity, adaptability, and respect for the environment. They were places of community culture and survival. They remind us that sustainable living isn't a new concept, it's one that has been practiced for thousands of years. As we look to the future, we can draw on the wisdom of these ancient homes to guide us toward a more sustainable and harmonious way of living. As we delve deeper into the history of these underground homes, it becomes clear that their influence is far-reaching, not only in terms of architecture, but also in how they shaped the people who lived in them. The homes we've explored so far were not simply structures, they were integral to the cultures and communities that built them. The act of living underground, in harmony with the earth, reflects a profound understanding of the environment, cooperation, and sustainability. These homes were not just shelters from the cold, they were living expressions of the human ability to adapt and thrive in even the most challenging circumstances. Imagine the daily life inside one of these underground homes. The warmth of the hearth fills the air and the scent of wood smoke lingers, mingling with the cool earth surrounding you. The sound of crackling firewood provides the backdrop to conversation, laughter, and the quiet, purposeful activities of daily life. These homes were designed to accommodate the natural rhythms of life. The seasons dictated much of the work, from gathering food to preparing the living space for the long, harsh winters. Every action, every decision was shaped by the environment, whether it was harvesting food, maintaining the warmth of the fire, or simply keeping the space comfortable. A mainstream historical fact is that many of these homes were passed down through generations, with each family or community contributing to the upkeep and refinement of the structure. Over time, these homes became repositories of knowledge and tradition. The design of the home itself evolved based on accumulated wisdom generation after generation, adapting the space to fit their growing needs. The process of building these homes was not one of rapid construction, but of thoughtful, gradual development. Each modification or addition was driven by necessity, and the knowledge that living in harmony with the earth would ensure survival. The homes became a long-term investment in both the physical and cultural continuity of the community. A quirky detail here is the use of specific building materials, which in some cases were chosen for their cultural significance as much as their practical value. For instance, in some regions, the people who built these homes would select certain stones or wood not only for their insulating properties, but because they were believed to carry spiritual meaning. The materials were thought to represent a bond with the land itself, imbuing the home with a deeper connection to the earth and its protective qualities. This reverence for materials extended beyond the physical construction, influencing rituals and traditions performed in and around the home. Every stone placed, every beam of wood used carried with it a deeper cultural significance. Historians still debate whether this connection between building materials and spiritual beliefs was a widespread practice or more specific to particular groups or regions. Some argue that it was a universal belief, while others suggest it was a local tradition shaped by the unique culture of each group. Regardless of how prevalent these practices were, it's clear that the act of building these homes went beyond mere survival. These homes were a reflection of the people's relationship with the land, their environment, and their ancestors. As we continue to explore these homes, it's impossible to ignore how they also acted as central hubs for community life. Living in such close proximity required a level of cooperation that went far beyond simply sharing space. These homes often housed extended families or even multiple families, each contributing to the collective effort needed to maintain the home. The spaces were designed to accommodate this kind of communal living. From shared sleeping areas to collective cooking spaces, these homes were the physical embodiment of a society that valued interdependence over isolation. Scholars still argue whether this communal living was the result of necessity or if it reflected a cultural preference for collective responsibility. Some researchers believe that the need for survival in extreme climates naturally fostered cooperation, as no one person or family could thrive without the help of others. Others suggest that the communal nature of these homes was more deeply ingrained in cultural traditions, reflecting a worldview where the well-being of the group was prioritized over individual needs. Regardless of the cause, it's clear that these homes were designed to promote social bonds. Cooperation and shared responsibility were central to life in these homes, reinforcing the importance of working together for the common good. A fascinating aspect of these homes is how the design of the space itself facilitated cooperation. For example, shared spaces like the hearth area and communal storage rooms encouraged constant interaction among family members and neighbours. The kitchen or cooking area was often a central hub of activity where food was prepared and shared. These areas became spaces not only for physical nourishment but for social bonding. Meals were often times for family members to come together, exchange stories and strengthen the communal ties that bound them. The fire at the heart of the home was not just a source of heat, it was also a symbol of life, bringing people together in warmth and community. At the same time, the design of the underground homes also addressed the practicalities of surviving in harsh climates. Every aspect of the home's construction was focused on insulation, temperature regulation, and maximizing the use of space. The low ceilings and compact designs were intentional, allowing for easier heat retention. The Earth's natural insulating properties were harnessed to maintain a stable interior temperature. This wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a space that allowed life to flourish in an otherwise inhospitable environment. Historians still debate how widespread these underground homes were and whether they were a short-lived phenomenon or a lasting cultural practice. Some believe that the use of underground homes was more of a response to specific extreme conditions in certain regions, while others suggest that it was a common practice in many cultures that had access to the right resources. What's clear, however, is that these homes played a pivotal role in the development of these communities. They were not just places of shelter, they were a foundation upon which entire ways of life were built. These homes were a testament to human resilience, creativity, and the drive to live in harmony with the natural world. As we look at these homes today, we are reminded of the ingenuity of the past and the lessons we can draw from it. In today's world where sustainability and eco-conscious living are becoming more urgent, the principles behind these underground homes are incredibly relevant. The use of natural materials, the importance of working with the land, and the emphasis on cooperation and community are all values that can be applied to modern architecture. These ancient homes remind us that even in the face of adversity, human beings are capable of extraordinary innovation and adaptation. As we reflect on the enduring legacy of these ancient underground homes, it becomes increasingly clear that they were not just innovative solutions to the harshness of nature. They were also a testament to the deep connection between people and the land that supported them. These homes, built from the earth itself, were not only practical shelters, but also spaces where culture, spirituality, and survival all came together. The people who lived in these homes were deeply attuned to the natural rhythms of the world around them, and their homes were designed to reflect that connection. Picture yourself in one of these homes, the thick earthen walls surrounding you. The low ceiling feels intimate, and the warmth from the hearth radiates throughout the space. There is no separation between work and life. Everything is integrated into this space. The fire that burns at the center isn't just for warmth, but for cooking light and bringing people together. The home itself feels alive, pulsing with the energy of the earth and the rhythm of daily activities. A mainstream historical fact is that in these underground homes, every feature of the space was designed with purpose. The low ceilings were not just for warmth, they also made the space feel more secure and intimate, reducing the amount of air that could escape. Rooms were often arranged in a way that maximized the flow of heat, with sleeping platforms placed near the walls to take advantage of the warmth stored in the earth. The materials used, earthstone, ice, and animal hides, were carefully selected for their insulating properties, ensuring that the homes remained as comfortable as possible in the harshest of environments. A quirky detail about these homes is how they also served as places of spiritual connection. In many cultures, living underground was seen as a way of returning to the earth and connecting with the spirits of the land. The very act of digging into the earth to create a home was viewed as an intimate act, one that symbolized the deep relationship between people and the land. Some homes even had small shrines or ceremonial spaces carved into the walls where offerings were left to honor the spirits of nature ancestors or the gods. These homes then were not only physical shelters, but also places of spiritual and cultural significance. Historians still argue whether the spiritual significance of living underground was a universal belief or specific to certain cultures. Some suggest that the symbolism of returning to the earth was present in many cultures, serving as a reminder of humanity's connection to nature. Others argue that this belief was more localized, a product of the particular cultural and spiritual values of specific communities. While the debate continues, it's clear that these homes were not just utilitarian. They were places of profound meaning, where the connection to the land and to the people who came before was felt on a deep spiritual level. Living underground also encouraged a sense of community. The close quarters meant that families or even entire communities lived together in tight spaces, relying on each other for warmth, food, and companionship. The communal aspects of these homes were central to their success. Everyone had a role to play, whether it was tending to the fire, caring for the children, or maintaining the home. These homes weren't just about survival. They were about the shared responsibility of living in harmony with each other and the land. The spaces within these homes were designed to facilitate cooperation. Common areas such as kitchens or eating spaces were designed to bring people together, fostering interaction and solidarity. Scholars still debate whether the communal living arrangements in these underground homes were an outcome of necessity or a cultural preference. Some argue that the extreme conditions of the environment required people to live together in close quarters, as it was the only way to survive. Others suggest that these close-knit communities were a cultural value, emphasizing cooperation and shared responsibility. Whatever the cause, it's clear that these homes promoted unity and teamwork. The act of building and maintaining these homes was a collective effort, with each person contributing to the group's well-being. One particularly interesting aspect of these underground homes is how they were passed down through generations. These homes were not just built and forgotten, they were carefully maintained and adapted over time. Each new generation would add to the structure, improving and modifying it to suit the needs of the family or community. This constant adaptation meant that the homes were always evolving, reflecting the changing needs of the people who lived in them. In many ways, the homes themselves became a record of the community's history, with each modification and addition telling a story of survival, resilience, and innovation. A lesser-known fact about these homes is how they were adapted for specific climates. In some regions, the homes were built in such a way that they could store heat from the sun during the day using thick walls or domed roofs to absorb the sun's rays. In other areas, ice and snow were used to create homes that were naturally insulated with blocks of ice acting as a form of thermal mass. The adaptability of these homes to various climates and environments is a testament to the ingenuity of the people who built them. They didn't just adapt to their environment, they worked with it, using the resources at hand to create a home that was perfectly suited to their needs. As we look forward, the lessons we can learn from these ancient underground homes are more relevant than ever. In a world where sustainability and energy efficiency are becoming increasingly important, the principles behind these homes working with natural materials, using the earth for insulation and fostering community cooperation can provide valuable insights. Today, architects and designers are looking back at these ancient techniques and finding ways to adapt them to modern needs. From earth-sheltered homes to sustainable building practices, the wisdom of the past is once again informing the way we build for the future. These homes remind us that survival doesn't have to come at the cost of comfort or connection. By living in harmony with the environment and with each other, we can create spaces that are not only functional but deeply meaningful. The ancient builders of underground homes understood this well, and their legacy continues to inspire us today. The lessons of these homes, resilience, sustainability, and cooperation are the foundation for a more sustainable future, where our homes, communities, and relationships with the land are in balance. As we reach the final chapter of our exploration of underground homes, it's important to reflect on the profound impact these structures have had both on the people who lived in them and on the modern world. These homes, born out of necessity and ingenuity, were not just shelters. They were reflections of the deep relationship between humans and the land. They were a testament to human resilience, creativity, and the ability to adapt in the face of extreme conditions. Today, these ancient homes continue to inspire us in a world that is increasingly focused on sustainability and energy efficiency. Now imagine yourself once again inside one of these homes. The temperature remains steady, the warmth of the hearth circulating through the space providing comfort. The air feels fresh despite being surrounded by thick walls of earth. You can sense that the home is both functional and deeply connected to the land. It's not just a space for survival, it's a space for thriving. This is what these homes represented. A life lived in balance with nature, where every detail was designed to maximize efficiency, sustainability, and human connection. A mainstream historical fact is that these underground homes were not just practical, but also a means of creating community. The design of these homes naturally fostered collaboration and cooperation with communal spaces like kitchen storage areas and hearths that brought people together. The living arrangements, often consisting of multiple families or extended groups, promoted a collective sense of responsibility and interdependence. These homes were not isolated, they were interconnected spaces where people worked together to ensure survival and well-being. A quirky detail is that in some cultures the underground homes weren't just places of shelter and survival. They also served as gathering spots for celebrations, rituals, and community events. The communal hearth or gathering areas in these homes became places where stories were shared, music was played, and traditions were passed down through generations. These homes were cultural hubs as much as they were functional spaces. The hearth was the heart of the home, not only providing warmth, but also fostering a deep sense of community and shared identity. Historians still debate whether the choice to live underground was a result of necessity, or if it was also driven by cultural and spiritual beliefs. Some argue that these underground dwellings were purely pragmatic, developed in response to the harsh environments in which people lived. Others suggest that these homes were also spiritual spaces, where the act of living underground represented a deeper connection to the earth, to their ancestors, and to the land. This spiritual connection, if it existed, may have made these homes feel more like sacred spaces rather than simple structures of survival. In many ways, these homes were an embodiment of the balance between the practical and the spiritual. The careful design of these homes using natural materials and insulating techniques ensured survival in extreme conditions. At the same time, the homes were designed to foster community connection and cultural continuity. They were not just places to live, they were places that reflected the values, beliefs, and traditions of the people who built them. A fascinating aspect of these homes is how they have been rediscovered and adapted in modern times. With growing concerns over climate change, sustainability, and the need for energy-efficient living, architects are increasingly looking back at these ancient structures for inspiration. The principles behind underground homes, working with natural materials, harnessing the Earth's insulating properties, and designing for efficiency, are being integrated into modern eco-friendly homes. This resurgence of interest in earth-sheltered and energy-efficient homes is a powerful reminder of how ancient knowledge can help guide us toward a more sustainable future. Looking at these homes through the lens of modern sustainability, we can see that the core principles they embody, efficiency, community, and respect for the environment, are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. In a world where our current housing models often prioritize individualism and resource consumption, the communal and resource-conscious nature of these homes offers a powerful contrast. It serves as a reminder that how we live, how we build, and how we relate to the earth can either help or harm the planet. These ancient homes show us that living sustainably is not a new idea. It is a practice that has existed for centuries, deeply rooted in human ingenuity and respect for nature. As we look to the future, we can take inspiration from these ancient builders. Their ability to create homes that were not only functional but deeply in tune with the natural world offers valuable lessons. Modern architecture and design can look back to these homes for guidance on how to build structures that are energy efficient, socially connected, and environmentally respectful. The ancient builders of underground homes understood the importance of balance, and we can learn from that understanding as we seek to create more sustainable and harmonious living environments today. In the end, the story of these underground homes is a story of human creativity, resilience, and adaptability. These homes were not just shelters, they were a reflection of how people lived in harmony with the earth, respecting its power and resources. As we move into an uncertain future, we can look to the past for solutions that help us build a more sustainable and connected world. The wisdom of these ancient homes passed down through generations continues to inspire us, showing us that even in the most extreme environments, humanity can thrive when we work with nature rather than against it. Sweet dreams.